Welcome back to another journey, one in which we sit down together, breathe slowly, and let layers of everyday thoughts pass like fragile pieces of dust in the day's end. How precious it is that in the midst of the countless choices you can make, in the midst of the chaos of life, you spend time here with us, listening to the ancient whispers that have passed through generations of Zen masters. Tonight, we will enter the knowledge as soft as silk, as deep as an ancient well, and as still as the surface of a lake covered with autumn dew. These insights are not born to make you more mysterious, not to turn you into an enlightened person, but to gently soothe the incessant noise of the mind, to open the door to the peace that has always been deep within you, just to sleep behind the dust of never-ending thoughts. As you listen, try to relax your shoulders, letting go of the things you're trying to hold on to, but don't really need. Feel where your body is leaning on. Feel the breath going in and out like gentle waves. In this moment, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be right. You don't have to do anything. You just need to be present. In the distant echoes of past generations, it is still said that true silence does not come from the rearrangement of the external world, but from the transformation of the inner landscape. Some people spend their lives chasing the things they think will bring them peace: a warm home, a stable job, a loved one, a secure future. But when they have everything, their minds are still as noisy as the morning market. There are also people who don't have much wealth, live simply and modestly, but just look into their eyes. You will see that something is very clear. Why is that? Because peace is not in the way we look, but in the way we look. That's why tonight, as we breathe deeply together, I want to tell you the story of a weaver named Juro, who spent half his life weaving beautiful fabrics, and the other half of his life weaving the stillness of his mind. Once upon a time, in a small village in the middle of a golden maple forest that burned every autumn, there was a weaver who was famous throughout the region named Juro. The tapestries and silk rolls he weave are so exquisite that it is said that each piece of his fabric has not only an image but also a soul. His hands were as soft as water, so deftly that at the touch of the silk threads seemed to understand where he wanted them to go. But then, over the years, Juro gave up his profession as a weaver to become a monk, entering the Zen path. He left the loom, left the noisy life, and chose a small meditation house in the deserted forest to live quiet days. Yet his old loom, which he had spent so many seasons with, was kept in a small workshop behind the meditation room, like an old friend sleeping in the dust of time. One autumn morning, when the dew was still on the grass and the first rays of sunlight were beginning to touch the foliage, a young monk came to Juro. His face was so tense that just by looking at it, he knew that his mind was being stretched more than the threads on the loom. He bowed deeply to his master, but his voice was trembling, full of fatigue, full of a kind of frustration that he himself could not name. He said he meditated for hours, until his stiff legs could no longer be felt. He read the scriptures until his eyes were red and sad as if he was crying. He kept the precepts so strictly that others had to admire them. Yet his mind was still a mess. Thoughts dragged in all directions, emotions against each other like stormy waves, and he couldn't find any pattern or meaning in the confusion. How do you solve the problem? How do you find the pattern that people talk about? Juro did not answer immediately. His eyes, as deep as the surface of an ancient lake, looked at the student with compassion rather than judgment. Then he stood up and motioned for him to follow. They walked through the small courtyard, where the maple leaves fell like silent specks of gold, and into the old workshop, where Juro's loom stood still as a witness to time. On the loom was a semi-finished piece of cloth, a work left where it had been interrupted, no more, no less, just as Juro's hand had left it years before. "Tell me what you see," Juro said. His voice was so soft that it was like a breeze. The young monk approached, looked at the cloth facing them, and immediately frowned. The underside of the cloth is a scene that cannot be called anything other than chaos. Red, yellow, blue, and white threads intertwined without any rules. There are ugly knots right in the middle of the threads. There are unfinished and loose broken strands. There are passages that seem to be pulled over and then abandoned. He looked at it for a while, and then shook his head. It's so ugly. It's nonsense. It's like my heart. Juro does not refute, does not comfort, does not explain. He pointed to the other side of the loom and said softly, "Come here." And as the young monk walked around in front of the cloth, the breath in his throat suddenly choked as if held by an invisible hand. Because from this side, the front, the canvas is a beautiful picture. A white crane is spreading its wings wide in the deep blue sky. The light reflecting off each silk makes the crane's feathers look so vivid that it seems that with a light touch, it will take off. Places that he saw from the underside were meaningless. Knots were now the details that made up the buoy of the bird's feathers. The loose threads that he thought were mistakes now turned into wind lines that fluttered through the crane's body. Even the parts that he thought were unfinished were not abandonment, but the intention to keep the crane forever in the moment it was soaring. Juro put his hand on his shoulder and said, "The mind is not a problem that needs to be fixed. It's just a rug looking from the wrong side." The young monk stood silent. His heart felt like something that had never been opened now opened the door. He realized that for a long time, he had always looked at his mind as if he were looking at the underside of the fabric, only tangled, imperfect, messy. He tries to correct every thought, tries to remove every emotion, tries to force everything to be neat, without knowing that the edit only made things more confusing. The mind is not for coercion, but for observation. Not to control, but to recognize. An ancient Zen master said, "When the mind is still, the soul begins to speak." But it is often understood that silence means that there are no more thoughts at all. Actually, this is not the case. Stillness is when you no longer see thoughts as the enemy. It's when you are no longer caught up in each story your mind tells. It's when you look at things like a person standing from above, looking at the entire carpet. While the young monk listened, Juro said that the human mind is like waves on the surface of the sea. The sea never blames the waves for making them move. The sea understands that waves are part of it. Also, you don't need to dispel thoughts to be peaceful. Peace is the ability to stand still even when the mind is moving. Modern neuroscience says the same thing, albeit in a different language. The random thoughts that we think are distractions are actually the brain's natural self-healing process. Reconnecting memories, processing emotions, creating creativity. When we try to force the right brain to be silent, we are forcing it to stop healing itself. It's not that our mind has a problem. It's the way we look at it that makes it a problem. If you look at a knot from the wrong side, you think it's a mistake, Juro said. But when you look at it from the right side, it's what gives the crane its shape. The young monk was silent for a long time. And in that silence, for the first time in years, he felt something like a light gap in his mind. Not enlightenment, not total understanding, but relief. The relief of realizing that he doesn't have to fight his mind anymore. You just need to look from the right side. That night, when everything gradually sank into darkness, when the gentle breeze shook the maple branches and the moon hung like a white lantern, the young monk sat in meditation in a small room. But this time, he didn't try to put his thoughts away. He just watched them emerge and dissolve like threads falling to the ground. Every thought is no longer a threat. They were like small pieces of carpet that he hadn't seen before. And when his eyes closed, he imagined himself standing in front of Juro's loom. He watched each thought, red, blue, yellow, pass. He doesn't force them to be straight. Don't force them to be beautiful. He just let them go. And the more he let them go, the more he saw one thing. There was a design that was emerging, a design he couldn't see yet, but he knew that it was slowly taking shape. As you prepare to fall asleep tonight, give yourself permission to do the same. Think of your mind as the weaver's rug. Let thoughts come and go without managing them. Let's stand from the nicer side of the loom. Breathe very lightly, very slowly, and believe that even the things you find the most confusing are contributing to the beautiful crane of your awakening. Peace is not what you have to look for. Peace is what you recognize when you change your perspective. And tonight, in the stillness that is slowly spreading into your body, the crane is spreading its wings. It's always there, just waiting for you to look from the right side. In the overlapping mountains of an ancient province, where the early clouds still wrapped around the old pines, and the echoes of the streams echoed through the narrow rocky gorges, lived a governor who was known throughout the region for his efficiency, his strictness, and his devotion to duty. His life was an endless series of days that began when the sky was still faint on the horizon and ended long after the night had penetrated into each ravine. He handled legal disputes, resolved conflicts among the people, received envoys from neighboring provinces, made administrative plans, weighed decisions that affected thousands of lives, and faced countless demands that required both determination and wisdom. His mind works like a massive machine, constantly spinning between laws, regulations, debates, and strategies, without a minute of rest. But deep in his chest, hidden under the facade of worldly success and power, was a nameless insecurity, like a heavy, cold stone pressed against his chest. Although his career advancement was second to none, although the people respected him, and his subordinates respected him, and even though his authority was far away, he could not escape the feeling that he was drowning in restlessness, exhaustion, and insecurity. Many nights, when the city is off the lights and only the light of torches along the city walls is creeping, he still sits in front of his desk, looking at the stack of documents piled up like mountains in front of him, seeing his heart as a bottomless, deep hole. Rumors reached his ears about a hermit who lived alone in the high mountains, away from the world, devoting his life to silence and contemplation. It is said that he understands morality, penetrates people's hearts, and is able to point out the root of hidden sufferings that even the bearer himself does not realize. At first, the governor regarded these stories as innocuous folk tales. But then, as his anxiety grew, when he woke up every morning feeling as if he had just gone through a battle instead of asleep, he began to be compelled to go to the hermit. Perhaps he was just hoping to find some peace. Perhaps he just wanted to hear some vague advice that would lighten his heart. But perhaps deep down, he understood that he had reached his limits and needed something beyond his abilities. So he decided to make the journey to the mountains. The road leading to the hermit lives is steep and jagged. Some sections are just small trails under barren old pine trees. Others go around the mountainside where the wind is strong, as if to sweep everything away. But the governor, accustomed to much greater pressure, persevered. When the sun had settled and the mountain mist had dissipated, he saw a simple stone well next to a low wooden hut. Next to the well, a silver-haired old man, with a thin figure but unusually bright eyes, was sitting still as if he had been waiting for him for a long time. "Old man," said the governor, carrying the familiar authority that made others admire, "I have traveled very far to see you. I carry on my shoulders the burden of thousands of people. My mind didn't rest for a second. It's full of things to deal with, laws to write, disputes to settle, plans to be made. Every decision affects countless lives. I have no peace, day or night. What word of wisdom can you give me to take on such a great responsibility?" The old hermit looked up at him, a deep gaze like the surface of a calm lake without ripples. Without saying anything, he slowly picked up the wooden bucket placed next to the well, tied it to a rope, and slowly dropped it. When pulled up, the water in the bucket was so clear that it looked like glass, so flat that even an insect could not disturb the water. "Look," the hermit said. The governor bowed, and for the first time he saw himself in a perfectly clear reflection. Eyes cloudy with insomnia, skin gray with stress, austere countenance with unrelenting responsibility and decisiveness. Perhaps never in his life did he see such exhaustion so clearly. Suddenly, the hermit picked up a long stick and stirred it hard into the bucket of water. In just a moment, the crystal-clear water surface turned into a chaotic vortex of mud and sediment from the bottom of the well. The opaque brown overflows curls together, completely obscuring any reflections. "Now," said the hermit, "find your image again." The governor bent down, leaning left and then right, changing his perspective, trying to see through the chaos, but to no avail. "I didn't see anything," he sighed, "just mud and confusion." The hermit nodded, as if that was the answer he was waiting for. "He came to me to seek peace, but all day long he stirred his heart. He adds new laws when the old ones are enough, more complex plans when simple solutions still work, more thinking when sometimes less is better." He believed that the more he thought, the clearer he became, but it was those thoughts that clouded his vision. He pointed to the bucket again. "You don't need to do anything to get the water clear again. No chemicals, no sludge skimming, no extra at all. Just stop stirring. The sludge will settle on its own. The water will clear on its own." Then he said a phrase that the governor will never forget. "Meditation brings wisdom. Lack of meditation breeds confusion. Knowing what keeps him forward and what pulls him down, that's wisdom." Those words were like a key to a door that the governor didn't know he had locked for years. He suddenly understood that what he lacked was not more processing power, but the ability to stop at the right time. His world celebrated busyness as a measure of value. He believes that if his mind is always working, he won't make mistakes. But it was that constant stream of thought that made his mind a bucket that was stirred forever. Never clear, never clear. He recalled his days in government. When he received a problem, he immediately thought of 3 contingency plans, 7 implementation steps, 10 possible scenarios. When someone said something that upset him, his mind immediately revolved around countless response scenarios. When he encountered difficulties, he immediately tried to control the situation instead of stepping back and observing. All of them were mental water-stirring movements that he never realized. The hermit added, "The calm mind is always there, like the calm water at the bottom of a well. No matter how much mud is stirred, as long as it is not touched, it will return to transparent. So is his natural intellect. It's not lost, it's just covered." The governor was silent. These seemingly simple teachings touched the very foundation of his heart. For years, he tried to prove himself through action, through speed, through absolute control. But he never thought that his greatest strength lay in the ability to stop. The hermit continued, "When you prepare for sleep, instead of letting your mind run after unfinished tasks, unfinished words, plans for tomorrow, let them be like sediment in the water. Let them settle down on their own. Don't stir it up with analysis or worry. Exhale and let go. Clarity is not what you force with effort, but what comes naturally when your mind is at rest." "Nothing can harm him like unguarded thoughts themselves," the hermit said, recalling the Buddha's teachings. "The greatest enemy is sometimes just the waves of mind that you create for yourself." The governor felt in his heart something like an open space, light, airy, and bright. Not because his responsibility disappeared, but because he began to realize a different approach. He understood that true strength did not come from trying to control things, but from the stillness necessary to see the direction clearly. As the sun gradually disappeared behind the mountains, darkness slowly descended into the valley. He bowed his head and thanked the hermit. The journey back was still long. The old responsibilities were still there, But something had changed in him. For the first time in many years, he saw himself not as a machine that had to run nonstop, but as the surface of the well. It could be clear, it could be cloudy, but there was always the possibility of returning to calm. That evening, when he returned to the palace, he lay down and listened to his own breath as if it were the first time in his life. Thoughts about work came, but this time he didn't follow. They passed like clouds. His heart gradually lightened. And before falling asleep, he whispered the phrase that the hermit had said, "Let the water settle." In the monastery, nestled among the rolling hills covered with ancient pines, where the morning wind often carries the sound of bells from the main hall and the gentle morning sun pours down the mossy stone steps, there is a monk named Kuji. Although he lived in a peaceful community, his days were always shrouded in a persistent darkness that could not be named, a shadow that seemed to follow his every step. As other monks go about their daily routine, with the relief and calm that Zen life provides, Kuji always bows as if he is carrying an invisible burden on his shoulders. His shoulders were hunched inward, his eyes were often on the ground, and even his breath seemed heavy, held back by the weight of an unspeakable shame. Since entering the monastery, no one has heard him talk about his past life, but everyone feels one thing. No matter what he does, the past is still like a shadow clinging to him. One morning after the Sangha's communal meditation session, as the other monks were preparing for the day's work, Kuji turned to his teacher, an elderly woman, slender, but with a temperament that was both strong and strangely harmonious. She was tending to the garden after the meditation hall, gently watering the young trees that had just been transplanted the day before. When she heard Kuji's footsteps, she didn't look up right away. The movements were still slow and cautious, as if she were talking to the sprouts. It was only when Kuji was standing next to her that she turned around, her eyes seemingly seeing his heart for a long time. "Teacher," Kuji said, his voice just like a hoarse breath, "I need to tell you this. He tormented me day and night. You cannot meditate peacefully. You cannot have a gentle breath, because your past actions follow you like a shadow. Before I came here, I wasn't a good person. I used to speak harshly to the people I loved. I used to be selfish and blind to petty desires. I used to make really hurtful choices. I feel like I always have to pay a debt for those mistakes, and the weight of it is crushing me. No matter how much you meditate, how much you keep the curfew, how hard you work, that shadow remains. It's like I want to define you." The teacher listened without interrupting. Her eyes covered the pupil's pain, as if hugging a trembling child. When Kuji finished speaking, she slowly brushed the dirt off her hands and stood upright. "Koji," she said in a gentle but clear voice, "you're absolutely right to worry about your shadow. Come with me. We'll go out on the pitch to take a closer look at it." Kuji complied. They walked out into the courtyard at noon, where the sun was at its peak, the light shining down so strongly that everything appeared sharp, with no place to hide. The teacher pointed to the ground. "There. Do you see it? Your shadow? It's dark, it's long, and it's clinging to you everywhere." Kuji looked down and saw his silhouette standing out against the bright stone background. It was it, the shadow he felt in his mind, now physically present in front of him. He bowed his head. "Yes, sir. This is what makes me miserable. He follows me everywhere." The teacher nodded slightly. "Since you are miserable for it, try to get rid of it. Free yourself from it." Kuji looked at him, confused but still confident. He started running, thinking that if he was fast enough, the shadow would be left behind. But it still sticks around. He jumped. The shadow jumped with him. He brushed it with his hand, as if to cut it off his body, but his hand only pierced through the darkness. He shouted at it, ordering it to disappear, but it remained silent. After a moment of desperate struggle, he collapsed, breathing heavily. "It's useless," he exclaimed, his voice cracking with frustration. "He won't leave you. I can't get rid of it." The teacher was not surprised. She just gently tossed her chin towards the end of the court. "But Koji, look over there." He looked up. In the corner of the yard grows a large oak tree that has lived for hundreds of years, the trunk of which is rough, the foliage of which covers an area of land with thick shade. "Go and stand under that tree," she said. Still breathing heavily, Kuji walked over, standing in the deep shade of the oak tree. When he looked down, he was startled. His shadow was completely gone. There was no longer his dark form on the ground. It had been absorbed by the shadow of the tree. His shadow was too small compared to the shadow of the tree. It dissolved into that vast darkness. The teacher walked up to him, her eyes sparkling as if reflecting something more ancient than the temple. "You see, Koji," she said, "you can't erase your shadow by running away, fighting, or denying it. The shadow, your past, is something that naturally exists in the presence of light, but you can choose to stand in the greater shade." She placed her hand on his shoulder, and her voice became deep as if she was repeating the teachings passed down through the generations. As the Buddha taught, hatred does not end with hatred, but only with love. This is the law of eternity. In the same way, the darkness within you cannot be dispelled by self-reproach or self-punishment. It's just embraced in a greater love. Kuji stood silent. The teacher's words seeped into him like water flowing through dry soil, softening some of the pain in his chest. The teacher continued, "Your shadow causes suffering because I think it defines me. But the ball is only a part of you, not the whole one. And it's only scary when you stand alone in the bright light of judgment. When you step into a greater shade, the shade of compassion, of the understanding that you are not alone in your mistakes, your own shadow will no longer frighten you." They stood under the oak tree for a long time. The wind blows through the foliage to make a sound like the sigh of heaven and earth. Kuji listens to his heart for the first time in years, not to judge, but to understand. She continued, "Many people think that guilt is a sign of morality, but in fact, it often becomes a burden that makes us just tangle around ourselves. When we identify ourselves with sin, we make our mistakes into our own identity. Since then, I have lived like a shadow instead of living as myself." She looked directly at him. "Prolonged sin is not wisdom. It's just a subtle form of the self, a way of clinging to the past to avoid changing now. Do you think self-blame will atone for your mistakes? Not. Only compassion and understanding can set you free. And it is from that liberation that I can do better in the present." Those words seemed to open a door in Kuji's heart. He remembered many nights lying awake, tormenting himself with images of the people he had hurt, believing that the more he suffered, the more he could pay off his old debt. But now he realized he had never really fixed anything with that torment. It only made him withdrawn, distant from everyone, and less able to help anyone. The teacher said, "I think my shadow is unique, but the truth is that everyone has a shadow. All sentient beings struggle with ignorance, greed, and anger. When you accept that, you will know how to put your mistakes in the wider context of humanity. It's a bigger shadow, where you no longer feel alone or defined by the past." Her face was gentle but solemn. If you really love yourself, as the Buddha said, you won't harm yourself with negative thoughts. You can't build your future by beating up the ego that made mistakes in the past. Let those mistakes be lessons, not shackles. Kuji looked down at the ground. Where he stood there was no longer his shadow, only the shadow of the ancient oak tree, a peaceful shade, like the arms of Mother Earth. For the first time, he felt that he was not being hunted by the past. Rather, it is encompassed in something bigger than him, beyond both his fears and shame. The teacher stepped into the light and said, "Now go back to the sun. But remember that your shadow is not the enemy. Let it go hand in hand with you, as a witness to your journey. Don't try to escape it. Just know that there's always a bigger shade behind you, a compassion to which you can return at any time." Kuji complied. When his shadow appeared on the ground again, he no longer saw it as an image of sin. It's just a part of him. No more, no less. That night, when the monastery was immersed in silence and the night breeze passed through the ancient pines, Kuji sat in the small room, lighting an oil lamp. The soft light shone on the walls. He closed his eyes and placed his hands on his chest. For the first time, he felt his breath not weighed down by an invisible debt. The past is still there, but it is no longer imprisoning him. He realized that his mistakes, rather than prison sentences, could become a source of insight into the pain of others. He found that every time he understood his own suffering, he became more gentle with others. And as I said, that is the greatest redemption. Before he went to sleep, he looked out the window. The old oak tree stood still under the moon, its shadow covering a corner of the courtyard like a large blanket to protect all species. He knew that every time he felt the old shadow come down again, he just had to remember the oak tree. Remember that there was a wider shade that had been, was, and always would envelop his shadow. And so, in the present moment, in the shadow of compassion, the deepest shadow within him has transformed into wisdom, into connection with all human beings who also carry their own shadows. And he smiled, knowing that from now on he walked not to flee his shadow anymore, but to live with it with an open heart. In the distant mountains, where the mist rolls up every morning like the breath of heaven and earth, there is a winding road known only to those who are busy seeking peace of mind. The road led to a reclusive monastery, where it was rumored that there was a teacher who possessed such profound wisdom that just one meeting with him was enough to change one's outlook on life. But the strange thing is that it is not the treacherous journey up the mountain that makes it difficult for people to approach the teacher. But what is waiting at the end of the road? When the last traveler passed the narrowest bend of the mountainside, before them appeared a massive gate more than 15 feet high, erected of dark wood, shiny as if it had been struck with the oil of previous generations. The wood was braced with thick strips of ash-gray iron, as if it could last for hundreds of years without deterioration. The gate was perfectly placed between two huge stone walls that stretched as far as the eye could not see. On the surface of the wood are carvings so intricate that one feels like they are moving with the breath of the mountains. Dragons fly through the clouds, phoenixes spread their wings amidst whirlwinds, and clouds twist like flowing water. People often stop for hours just to look at these figures in the changing light of the afternoon, as if they are about to come to life. What makes this gate legendary is not just its beauty, but its incomprehensible strangeness. No handles, no hinges, no keyholes, no signs that it can open. The path leads straight to the gate, but it is a silent statement that this place is not for everyone. For years, countless searchers have come here. They have devotion, perseverance, and the hope that if they work hard enough or are smart enough, they will find a way to open the gates to the monastery. They sit in front of the gate every day in meditation, sometimes immersed in silence, sometimes straining their eyes to search for every slightest trace that can reveal the hidden mechanism. Some people ran their hands lightly over each carving, as if hoping that the wood could reveal its secrets. Some people believe that the motifs are a mystical riddle. As long as they are solved correctly, the gate will turn to the side like a miracle. Others were stronger. They pushed the gate with all their might, so much so that they let out a groan of wood but did not move an inch. Some people came down to the village with hammers, chisels, and all sorts of tools, trying to find weaknesses or openings, but all they found were numb hands and the belief that the gate was protected by an invisible force. Some people even tried to dig beneath the stone wall, but the deeper they dug, the more they realized that the wall stretched down to the bottom of the mountain, as if it had been built by nature itself to challenge them. Over time, these efforts became increasingly hopeless. Some people fast for weeks in the belief that as the body weakens, spiritual intuition strengthens and reveals the secrets of the gate. Some people chant day after day, hoping that the rhythmic sound sequence will create a vibration that awakens some mechanism. But then most of them left in sluggishness and disappointment. They tell others that the monastery is inaccessible, that the teacher is probably just a myth woven to challenge those who seek the spiritual path. Those disappointment stories spread gradually, turning the gate into a symbol of the impossible. One chilly autumn morning, when the yellow leaves fall gently in the wind, a young traveler arrives at the gate. Unlike his predecessors, who were full of tools and plans, he only carried a small bag and a simple cane. When he stood in front of that famous gate, he did not show excessive anxiety or excitement. He just watched quietly, observing as if he were looking at a picture instead of trying to find a way to get through. He spent exactly one day admiring the gate. Don't try to decipher it. Don't touch it as many times as everyone else. Don't struggle to find the answer. He just looked and felt. As the day began to turn to the afternoon, the sunlight faded. He let out a sigh, not of disappointment, but of acceptance. Then he got up, dusting off his robe. Everyone thought he would leave like the previous losers, but he didn't go down the mountain. He walked to the left, taking about 20 steps. There, the giant stone wall ends. It doesn't last as indefinitely as people think. Most of the previous ones simply hadn't thought about going around it. And so he walked around. On the other side of the wall, the scene was completely different. A quiet garden appeared, the petals of the cherry blossoms falling lightly to the ground, and under the canopy of the trees was the teacher that many sought. He sat silently as if the stillness had existed before the garden and the mountain were born. When he saw the young traveler, he smiled with a smile as light as the breeze. His eyes lit up with gentle delight, like a parent watching a young child find the solution to a puzzle that adults seem difficult. "I've spent quite a bit of time looking at the gate," the teacher said, his voice mingled with warmth and a hint of humor. The young man sat down opposite him, gently setting the cane aside. He replied calmly, "I admire the ingenuity of the person who made it. It's really beautiful. But I think a gate is only a gate if I believe it's the only way to get through." The teacher nodded slightly. His eyes seemed to brighten. The silence that followed was so long and quiet that one could hear the wind creeping through the branches. In that silence, there is a feeling as if the answer that so many people have been searching for years has never been in the gate, but in this moment, the moment of realization. That mysterious gate is a symbol of the barriers that people create in their own minds. These barriers sometimes seem so massive and complex that we believe that only extraordinary effort can be overcome. But meditation reminds us that many obstacles exist mainly because we believe in them. We tend to complicate things. We think that precious things must come from hard work, that enlightenment must come at the cost of many months of hard work. But sometimes simplicity has in it a depth that we don't see. We often get stuck in overanalyzing problems. Like those who spend months studying each carved pattern, we can also get caught up in the complexity of life's difficulties, strained relationships, work that is no longer suitable, the search for peace in our minds. We think that the solution must be commensurate with the difficulty, so we don't accept simpler steps. Sometimes we try to mend a relationship with heavy conversations and forget that sometimes we just need to accept each other as we are. Sometimes we try to love a job that isn't a good fit just because we believe that quitting is a failure. Sometimes we find peace through complicated rituals and forget the stillness that exists in our breath. Zen master Alan Watts once said about the law of reverse, "The more you try to grasp something, the more it avoids." The people in front of the gate were trying harder and harder, and that prevented them from seeing a simple truth. Not every gate is meant to be opened. Sometimes they are just an invitation to look in a different direction. The young traveler differs from his predecessors not because he is more intelligent, but because he does not limit himself to the assumption that the gate is the only entrance. His willingness to see that there may be another path, even if it seems contrary to everything one thinks, is the spirit of Zen. The mind does not know. A mind that doesn't try to cling to old knowledge, doesn't think that it understands everything, doesn't insist that there's only one right way. The teacher in the garden did not teach him any lessons in words, because the lesson is already in his own actions. That sometimes we just need to take a few steps aside, and the seemingly impossible turn out to be extremely simple. In everyone's life, there is always a gate. Sometimes it's the expectations we place on ourselves. Sometimes it's a fear that we don't dare to face. Sometimes it's the belief that we have to be strong. We have to endure. We have to find a way to overcome it on our own. But Zen reminds us that thousands of candles can be lit from one candle without extinguishing the original one. Happiness spreads when we share. The path opens up when we stop being stubborn, and the gate disappears when we are humble enough to step in the other direction. Maybe we just need to ask for help. Maybe we just need to let go of an unnecessary expectation. Maybe we just need to try a new approach, even if it's so simple that we used to think it can't be the right solution. And it's also possible that, like the young traveler, we'll find our own garden right behind the wall that we thought would last forever. After a long night in a dream filled with the smell of earth, dew, and the sound of someone's footsteps passing through the ravine, the young man woke up with a strange feeling, as if he had just returned from some distant and familiar place that he couldn't name him. The morning cold covered his skin, but there was a strange warmth in his heart, like someone had lit a dim but persistent lamp in his chest. He sat up and looked out the window, where the dewy leaves shook gently in the wind. The room was so quiet that he could clearly hear his breathing, slow, deep, and light, as if it were blending into the air. In that moment, he suddenly felt that it was all just a vague mist, and that he was just a fragile strip of smoke with no clear shape. He still remembered the moment in his dream. He was walking along a trail, the ground beneath his feet as soft as young mud after the rain. On both sides were low bushes. Occasionally, a few drops of water fell with each gentle touch of the wind. In front of him was a man walking lightly, with his back straight, his hands down, but his appearance exuded a strange equanimity. Every time he tried to get closer, the path seemed to get longer. But he still patiently walked on, not in a hurry, not worried. There was only a feeling of being sucked into a soothing light emanating from that back. And the moment he was about to touch that person's shoulder, the dream disappeared. He woke up, his heart lingering with an unknown question. Who is walking ahead of me? He stood up, opened the door, and walked out to the veranda. The morning sky was clear, as if it had just been washed away. A breath of cool air hit his face, making him feel more calm. For some reason, he had a hunch that today would be a different day from the previous days. There was something waiting for him in the distance, not an event, nor an event, but like something that had been in his life for a long time. Only today it was revealing. He put on a thin coat and walked out to the small street in front of the house. The village road in the morning always has a very unique beauty. Light, modest, nothing tries to impress. The smell of kitchen smoke wafted from the low-tiled roofs. A few roosters were crowing late, and the sound of water flowing from the small ditch next to the road. It's all normal, but so beautiful that if someone asks what's going on, he can only reply, nothing. But maybe it's that nothing that makes you feel full. When he came to the road that turned into the forest west of the village, where a small clear stream flowed through, he involuntarily stopped. A puppy, perhaps only a few months old, was lying in the bushes by the roadside. The small body trembled with each beat. Its fur was stained and messed up by the cold dew. He walked over softly, afraid of panicking it. But when he held out his hand, the dog just moved his head and was silent, his round black eyes flashing as if he wanted to ask something. There was not a shout, no resistance, no resistance. There was only complete surrender, a strange belief in the hand that was stretched out in front of him. He lifted it, feeling a very light warmth from his small body. There was something in that moment that touched him, as if the dog himself was giving him an invisible rope, leading him into a world where he had only stood outside. He held the dog in his lap and continued walking, each step lighter than before. He went to the forest lawn, where he used to sit for a while every morning to watch the sunrise. But this morning, he didn't look at the sun. Instead, he put the dog down and looked into its eyes. Strangely, the longer he looked, the more he felt like he had disappeared. There was no more him, no more the puppy. There was only a soft silence like the unrippled surface of a lake. A thought flashed through his mind. Perhaps this is what Zen masters often call selflessness. It's not about losing, it's about not having to be anything. At that moment, from behind, a man's deep voice sounded. "You seem to have arrived at the right time." He turned around startled. Behind him was an old monk, with a slender but sturdy figure, a gentle face with bright eyes. He had definitely never met him, but somehow it felt very familiar, like the figure of the man in his dream last night. He bowed his head in greeting. The monk smiled. "I saw you from a distance. I'm careful and gentle with that little puppy. It shows that my heart is soft." Then he looked deeply into his eyes like white clouds drifting gently. A soft heart is easy to see. He didn't fully understand what he meant, but he saw it as the key to unlocking something. Something that was waiting for the very words to open. The monk sat down on the grass next to him. The little puppy rested its head on his feet without any fear. He stroked its head lightly, then asked, "Do you know why you picked it up?" He replied that it was because he saw that it was poor. The monk shook his head. "No, I picked it up because it picked me up first." Before he could understand, he continued, "If you have a fate, you will meet. But when my heart is quiet, I no longer see the separation between me and it." At that time, meeting everyone is meeting yourself. Therefore, what you do for him is also what you do for yourself. A light breeze passed by. The leaves rustle as if applauding something. The monk stood up, picked up the puppy, and handed it back to him. "Now I have to go. I brought him back. When your mind is big enough to contain a weak being, then your mind can also contain yourself, your true self." He looked at him, trying to suppress his desire to ask more questions. But the monk just smiled and said, "Go. The road will tell the rest." He walked, his back straight, his pace steady, just like the figure in his dream. He was about to call him back, but an invisible force made him stand still. He just watched until his shadow blended into the woods and disappeared. He returned. The rest of the time, he only echoed the sentence in his head. "He picked me up first." And every time he remembered, he felt something in his heart expand a little more, like the water spreading out in a circle after throwing a small pebble into the lake. The puppy was sleeping on his lap, breathing evenly and lightly. He smiled slightly. As it turns out, sometimes people need a small creature to see themselves expand. In the evening, he put the dog next to him and fell asleep very quickly. And this time, the dream is back, but different. He no longer followed the shadow of a person. He walked in parallel beside him. The fog in front of him gradually dissipated, revealing a wide and bright road. Nothing special, no miracles. It's just the ground under your feet, the wind on your cheeks, and the feeling of no longer being detached from anything. When he woke up, he understood one thing. The miracle was not in the dream, not in the monk, not in the puppy. The miracle was in the moment he found himself no longer standing outside of life, but merging into it. And from that moment on, he knew that his journey had indeed begun, not toward a place, but inward, where all the answers awaited. As the journey continues, something unexpected begins to happen inside the disciple, as if the mountain is silently setting him up for a lesson he didn't know he was being led into. The conversations in his mind that had always been noisy, jostling, vying for his attention. The voices of commentary, analysis, self-criticism, comparison, judgment began to disappear layer by layer. They didn't disappear because he tried to eliminate them or meditate to extinguish them, but simply because there was no room for them to enter. Every strand of his attention was necessary for the only task at hand, to keep the water in the cup that didn't spill. The vast familiar world gradually shrunk into several streamlined elements to the end. The water surface trembled in a wooden cup. The next step on the mountain road, the breathing rate is regular. The feeling of the mountain wind touching the skin. The weight of the body is placed in every moment. And in that pure concentration, the mountain road that was so familiar suddenly revealed details that he had never really seen before. He recognized the distinct fragrance of each type of pine needle, the very small but obvious difference between the thick and sparse canopies that caused the light to filter down in different qualities, creating a multitude of shades on the moist ground. His ears could clearly hear the intricate harmony that the mountain spoke, the sound of birds singing on high floors, the rustling of leaves as if in dialogue with the wind, the sound of a stream murmuring from somewhere farther away, and the sound of the ground crackling beneath each step. He realized that the water in the cup seemed to contain the extended stillness of the mountain itself. And in order to keep it from falling, he had to express that quality of stillness in every movement. When he finally reached the stream on the north slope, after several hours of intense walking, his legs ached with fatigue, but his mind reached a clarity he had never known before. Pouring water into a cup becomes a slow, conscious ritual. Watching the clear water rise, feeling the coolness at your fingertips, adjusting every millimeter so that you don't splash a single drop. The journey back required the same level of attention, and he realized he had walked with unprecedented wholeheartedness. When he returned to Master Uetsu's area, the sun was setting, and long shadows began to cover the monastery grounds. He was physically exhausted, but filled with an unusually vibrant peace, as if a clear stream was flowing through his center. He lowered his head, lifting the glass of water with both hands. "Master," he said, his voice taking on a calm tone that was different from the morning, "I brought back the water as you requested." Master Uetsu looked at the cup, then smiled softly, but did not extend his hand to accept it. "I'm not thirsty," she said. Then she asked quietly, "So, what does the mountain taste like?" The disciple opened his mouth to reply, but a wide gap blocked all words. He realized that his constant question about direct experience was not answered with words, but with life. By being fully focused on keeping the water from falling, he tasted the mountain itself, not with his tongue, but with his entire presence. He breathed its air with such a high degree of self-awareness that it permeated him. Feel each step to the point that the boundary between the person walking and the ground is no longer clear. He moved through the landscape as if he were a natural part of it. He bowed his head deeply, understanding that the spring water was not only full in the cup, but also in his soul. Recalling the Buddha's words, "Don't believe in anything just because you've heard it. But after observation and analysis, when you see that what is in line with reason and benefits yourself and others, accept it and live it." He understood that spiritual truth is never in concepts or descriptions, but can only live directly in the present. So why do we struggle forever with the gap between intellectual understanding and direct perception? Zen Buddhism says that the thinking mind, while useful, tends to become a veil because it tries to explain rather than experience. We try to understand the taste of water by analyzing its chemical structure. We try to understand the beauty of music by acoustic formulas, but we forget that there are things that can only be known by tasting, hearing, touching, living. Take a deep look at your own experience. Have you ever found yourself on the edge of your life to analyze instead of live? Perhaps you spend more time reading about meditation than sitting in the simple stillness of your breath. Perhaps you're always planning for future experiences instead of living the moment to the fullest. Like the disciple before our journey, we believe that knowledge must come by thinking, when in fact it comes by wholeheartedness. The water in his cup represents any activity that requires full presence: washing dishes, walking, listening to someone, feeling a heartbeat, or breathing. These trivial activities become the gateway to enlightenment, not because they are special in themselves, but because of the level of attention we give them. Zen master Jon Kabat-Zinn once said that meditation is special, intentional, present moment, and non-judgmental. When the disciple focuses absolutely on preserving every drop of water, he creates the right conditions: intentional, presence, non-judgment. And when attention is gathered on such a point, the detached mind, the mind that always divides everything into subject and object, ceases to dominate. He tastes what Zen calls as a vision: reality before all divisions, before the mind assigns names or judges. This phenomenon is not just an ancient doctrine. Modern neuroscience also shows that when we focus entirely on the actual activity, the brain's default network, the center of worry, self-referentiality, and rambling thinking, becomes less functional. People in that state often describe the experience as similar to flow. They are deeply connected to reality, feel clear, alive, and know directly without thinking. The Buddha once reminded, the present moment is the only moment we really have. This is not a philosophy, but a practical guide. Each moment invites us to step into intuition, just like the challenge the disciple received from Master Wetsu. As you prepare for sleep tonight, do you remember that glass of water? Instead of letting your mind run to the past or to the future, you can immerse yourself in the sensation of your body when you lie down: the softness of the blanket, the slowing of your breathing, the relaxation that spreads through your muscles. In that presence, you can taste the material of the moment that you thought you were looking for elsewhere. As the Buddha taught, the wise man finds joy in the truth and does not stray from it. And that truth is never hidden in complex layers of philosophy. It's almost like the next breath you're about to take: inhale, a breath that can contain an entire mountain if you're willing to taste it firsthand. At Cao Chu's Grand Monastery, where hundreds of monks from all over the mountains flock each year to train their minds and study the Tao, the morning rhythm always follows a tradition so old that it seems that the breath of the mountains itself blends in. Before the sun could come out, the sound of the brass bell rang softly but resonantly enough to shake every soul still in the darkness of sleep. The monks leave the small wooden rooms, put on their robes, enter the meditation hall, and sit in complete silence. Only when the first light of dawn hits the mountain peaks around the monastery does the meditation session end, and one by one they disperse, continuing their assigned tasks. Some people go to the garden to take care of the medicinal vegetables. Some go to the kitchen to prepare food for the whole monastery. Some people copy ancient texts. Some repair the tiled roofs and wooden buildings that have been eroded by time. Although they differ in their tasks, they all consider it as part of their practice, because in Zen there is no boundary between spiritual life and every small movement of everyday life. On a seemingly unusual morning, Abbot Chao Cho carried out his usual routine, strolling around the grounds to observe the health, spirit, and progress of his disciples' practice. Chao Cho is known as a teacher who is both gentle and insightful, able to penetrate the layers of words and appearances and directly touch the essence that is hidden in each person. The disciple in the monastery was always vigilant when talking to him, not out of fear, but because he knew that from any of his words, even the most ordinary, he could turn it into an unexpectedly profound lesson. As he passed behind the main meditation hall, a large building where the public gathered twice daily to sit in silence, the abbot saw a young monk sitting alone in the shade of the wooden columns. This monk seemed to be practicing something, although according to the schedule, he had to be elsewhere now, with his brothers on morning tasks. Chow walked closer, his steps so light that he seemed to be floating on the ground. "Brother?" he said in a voice as soft as the wind touching a leaf. "Where have all the virtuous people gone?" The question sounds like an everyday conversation, but for those who are familiar with Cao Chou's teaching style, it is never a simple question. Chow may be asking about the position, about the mood, about the meaning of the practice, about the presence of virtue, or about something deeper than that. The young monk, who had been in the monastery for several years and had always been confident in his ability to understand the teachings, looked up with a secret pride. He felt that he understood what he meant, and this was probably an opportunity to prove the maturity of his cognition. "They've all gone to work, sir," he replied in a stern voice, pointing to different parts of the monastery, where the sound of hoes, cutting knives, and clashing wood echoed. For him, this is the obvious answer. Ethical people work and contribute to building the community. Meditation, in his view, is a blend of stillness and activity, but he implicitly holds that those who choose to act are nobler than those who sit still. He didn't realize that the answer showed an invisible separation between doing and being, between effort and enlightenment. What happened next caused his entire foundation of knowledge to collapse in an instant. Without warning, Cao Chou reached into the folds of his shirt and pulled out a knife as bright as the dawn reflected on the steel blade. But instead of threatening his disciples, he did something even more terrifying. He put his throat in front of the blade, then handed the handle of the knife to the young monk. His face was completely calm, and his voice was light, as if he was asking for a simple task. "This abbot's burden is heavy and tired. I wonder if you can help me cut off my head to lighten the responsibility?" The young monk almost froze. The world in him collapsed, not piece by piece, but at a time. All the rules of rightness, morality, teachings, even the laws of humanity have become chaotic. He looked at the knife in his hand and felt like he was holding a foreign object that did not belong to reality. His hands trembled. He could not understand whether he was telling the truth or using metaphors. He could not see through the words to see the deeper meaning. He could not escape the dryness of the stereotypes that had taken root in his heart. Finally, terrified to the extreme, he dropped his knife to the ground and fled, leaving behind an indescribable panic. Cao Chou quietly picked up the knife, put it back in his shirt, and continued his morning walk as peacefully as if nothing had happened. There was not a ripple of confusion, not a moment of reproach. He just walked as if that moment was like so many other moments in life. A lesson was sown, and when the seed germinated, whether it sprouted or not, was up to the recipient. This story, when told in the monastery and for countless generations afterwards, becomes a living testament to the profound difference between mental understanding and true enlightenment. Why is it so easy for people to confuse the concept of spirit with true wisdom? Because the mind always wants to collect, classify, and construct clean theories, while true wisdom only appears when we break all the frameworks and directly experience the nature of life. The young monk's answer, while sounding reasonable, reflected a major misunderstanding. He believed that spiritual practice and mundane work were two separate planes. He believes that morality is expressed through useful action. He didn't realize that sitting still, or going to work, was not as important as being aware of each breath. And he didn't realize that his question was exposing a rift within himself. Cao Cho, by gesture of putting his neck on the blade, does not ask for the absurd. He is sending a radical lesson. If you truly believe that virtue lies in essential actions, then what is the most essential action in this moment? If you truly believe that helping is the ultimate expression of love, then do you dare to help when what is asked exceeds the limit of what your mind thinks is right? If you really understand selflessness, then why do you panic when you hear my offer? The young monk ran away, not because he was afraid of killing his teacher, but because he was afraid of losing the spiritual framework that he had clung to. He didn't see the offer as not a request to kill, but an invitation to break his attachment. A person who is suffering under the burden of responsibility may need help beyond the usual limits. A person who is trapped in the notion of the self sometimes needs to be cut off from the very notion. Zen master Linji once said, "If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill the Buddha." Not to kill the real Buddha, but to destroy the notion of the Buddha. Cao Cho is just conveying the same thing. In the daily life of each of us, the separation between the sacred and the mundane takes place continuously but subtly. We think there are spiritual moments and ordinary moments, important moments and trivial moments, moments worth cultivating, and moments of ignorance. We don't realize that awareness can be present in every step, every dishwasher, every time we carry water, and even in the moment when others need us most. Sometimes, when someone is in pain, we give advice, we give theories, we make statements that we think are wise. But we rarely touch that pain with a real presence. True compassion sometimes requires us to break our own spiritual comfort in order to step straight into the world of others. The young monk had knowledge, but no intuition. He knew how to talk about virtue, but when faced with a situation that demanded compassion beyond the box, he withdrew. And that flight was not from the knife or from the teacher, but from the fact that he was still afraid, attached, and relying more on the concept than on the living intellect. Meditation requires what the masters call big doubt. Not doubting the world, but doubting the very notions we hold about the world. It's not about doubting the Dharma. It's about the way we understand the Dharma. Not doubting the teacher, but doubting the ego that always wants to be right. When someone asks us for help, are we willing to let go of our thoughts about ourselves in response with an unfettered heart? When life poses a challenge beyond what we consider reasonable, do we have the courage to look at nature and not cling to form? The monk's suit, the monk's title, the concept of virtue are all just a shell. True wisdom sometimes flashes in the most paradoxical situations, like the moment an abbot hands his neck over to a disciple. The Buddha once said, "To take care of others is to take care of yourself. Taking care of yourself is taking care of others." Cao Cho's strange suggestion is not a desire to die, but a lesson in the dissolution of the boundaries between self and others when undifferentiated wisdom emerges. When people reach that place, all actions are spontaneous, pure, not dominated by the concept of right, wrong, yes, no, sacred, worldly. All is just a complete response of a free heart. The story of that day does not end at the moment when the young monk runs away. It lives on in the very life of each person who hears it. And tonight, when you meet people who are carrying burdens, when you are faced with the choice of helping or staying away, when you feel yourself caught between what is right and what is compassionate, perhaps you will remember the image of the old teacher tilting his neck in front of the shining blade. You'll wonder, does what I'm doing come from concept or intellect? From my safety or from compassion? From what I think is right, or from a direct view that does not go through the conceptual screen? And most likely, in that moment of honesty, you will realize that the path to awakening lies not in the sublime, but in breaking down the subtle walls that you yourself have built in your mind. Let us now explore a story of the invisible burdens that humans carry throughout life. Things that are invisible, but always have a profound impact on our souls and our walks. This is the story of the empty backpack, a seemingly simple symbol, but contains profound lessons about the past, forgiveness, and inner freedom. In the serene monastic garden, where the morning dew gleamed on the well-groomed paths, the tiny flowers remaining in the soft light of the dawn, a young man approached his teacher. His gaze reflected both determination and confusion, as if a lifetime of questions were converging in those eyes. He bowed respectfully, his voice trembling but firm. "Master, I want to better understand my path on earth. Why do you seem to carry your past with you and relive it over and over again? Why can't you overcome it?" He watched the young man with eyes filled with compassion, then pointed to a labyrinth made up of translucent, iridescent silk sheets in the morning sun. "Go forward into the labyrinth," he said, "and take this leather backpack with you. It will help your child focus. But be careful, because it's quite heavy." The boy was surprised that the teacher handed over this object normally, as if there was nothing special. He took the backpack, and as soon as it touched his shoulder, he felt an extraordinary weight that caused him to bend over, each step into the labyrinth becoming slow and heavy. Inside the labyrinth, the translucent silk walls create a sense of both familiarity and strangeness. Through this blur, he could see other figures struggling to find their way, all seemingly trapped in their own fears and kinks. He tried to turn left and right, but all roads were blocked, leaving him feeling exhausted. He sat down, thought, looked around, and wondered. Others have clearly gone before me. Should I cheat and crawl under the silk to outsmart them? After struggling with this thought for a while, he decided to keep his integrity, stand up, and continue walking with determination. A miracle happens. A gap appears, opening up the opportunity to move forward. This feeling excites him, but only when he encounters another wall. This time, despite his best efforts, the weight of the backpack became too much to bear, making his shoulders ache. He was confused, wondering how such a seemingly fragile, empty object could be so heavy. Full of curiosity, he put his backpack down and opened it to look inside. Nothing, completely empty. But when he lifted it again, the weight was still there, not diminished. A whispered voice rang out, as clear as if it was right in his ear. "Young man, look within you, for the burden is there." Immediately, memories rushed back. Childhood abusers, hurtful words, unfair behaviors, and even resentments accumulated over the years flooded his mind. He recalled every painful experience, every feeling of abandonment, every time he was misunderstood or hurt. With each memory, the backpack becomes even heavier. But along with the memory, an understanding began to flash in him. He realized that he himself was the weight, that he himself carried the burden of what bothered him, that the suffering did not come from what others had done, but from the fact that he was not ready to let go of those experiences. With this realization, the work of forgiveness begins. He said in his heart, "I forgive you, no matter where you are." Instantly, the atmosphere around him became lighter. The roads in front of him seemed to open. The sunlight warmed his face, and the loving moments from the past appeared like rays of light creeping through the mist. The backpack continued to lighten until he felt no longer weight. He sat down, surrounded by silk walls, and began to meditate. In that stillness, he realized a profound truth. I am the light and the way. I'm an obstacle, not anyone else. As these words rang through his mind, his feet began to lift off the ground, gently hovering over the labyrinth, seeing others still trapped in their own shadows. With a thought, he found himself standing beside his teacher, outside the labyrinth. His face was radiant, his eyes were full of joy and liberation. "Master," he said, "I discovered that my darkness had caused my burden, and my lightness had freed me to fly." He smiled, full of consciousness and compassion, and asked, "How do you feel, child? Do you feel free?" But without waiting for an answer, he kept going, leaving him with a sense of autonomy, freedom, and completeness. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us that holding anger is like holding a hot coal with the intention of throwing it at others. I was the one who was burned. This ancient teaching illuminates the story of the empty backpack. We are the ones who create our burdens. The past, the pains, the resentments, the disappointments do not imprison us. It is our relationship with them that keeps them in chains. The young seeker in the story realizes that the suffering is not in the actions or words of others, but in the fact that he is not ready to let go of those hurts. The empty backpack represents the invisible weight of unprocessed emotions, unhealed wounds that we carry with us throughout our lives. Why do we persist in holding on to pain? First, because we identify with the wound. We derive our identity from our grievances, thinking that we have been wronged rather than having experienced a wrongdoing, rather than realizing that we are not defined by pain. Second, because we are addicted to familiarity. Even the sensations of pain become familiar, making them a safe part of the spiritual life. Third, because we misunderstand forgiveness, thinking that forgiveness means condoning harmful behavior, rather than realizing forgiveness is freeing oneself from the prison of resentment. This happens every day. Coworkers take credit for your ideas, but you still hold anger. The criticism from parents decades ago still haunts the inside. Disappointments from the past still follow you like invisible objects in a backpack. Each thing is heavy, pressing on your shoulders, making it difficult for you to walk, difficult to live fully in the present. Zen master Jack Kornfield once taught, "To forgive is to give up all hope of having another past." We can't change what happened, but we can change our relationship to what happened, and the energy for grievances can be transformed to create the life we really want. Gentleness, freedom, and the ability to open the heart are the result of letting go of psychological burdens. This does not mean ignoring the pain, but rather facing it, experiencing it fully, and choosing freedom instead of clinging to familiar habits. Choose to grow up instead of grievances. Choose light instead of darkness. As we learn to lay down invisible burdens, we realize that the past no longer has the power to imprison us, that we ourselves, with all our flaws and pains, deserve our own love and care. And from there, every step of life becomes a journey of liberation and freedom. In the evening, as you prepare to rest, ask yourself, what invisible burdens are we carrying? What in the past still weighs on our shoulders, making our hearts tired and our spirits exhausted? Maybe it's time to put them down, breathe lightly, and realize that we're no longer forced to carry them. As the Buddha taught, every person, like every living being in the universe, is worthy of his own love and care. The path to freedom begins with radical forgiveness, with the ability to let go of what no longer serves our highest interests, and with a willingness to walk through the inevitable challenges of life with an open heart and unwavering inner light. The empty backpack, therefore, is no longer a weight on our shoulders, but a symbol of the realization that all the weight we feel comes from within, from unresolved resentments, unhealed memories, and expectations that have not yet been let go. When the young man looked at the backpack, he saw himself in it, seeing all the pain, all the disappointment, and all the confusion that had once held his heart. When he forgives, when he lets go, the backpack becomes light as air, and he realizes that freedom is not something that is sought outside, but something that opens itself up within. And from there, he walked out of the labyrinth, no longer feeling exhausted, no longer afraid, only serenity and a pure joy. He knew that each next step would be gentler, each decision would be based on wisdom and compassion, and that every moment of his life would become an opportunity to live fully, freely, and with awareness. The empty backpack, in the end, becomes a living reminder that every psychological burden can be laid down, Every suffering can be healed, and true freedom is always in our hands, right in this moment. Let us continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism with a story of ghosts that people create with their own minds. This is a story of obsession, not an obsession in a supernatural sense, but an obsession born of fear, guilt, and unprocessed memories, things that the human mind transforms into shape and power in its inner life. A man who used to live in peace with his loving wife for many years. Their love is deep and sincere. Their companionship is a source of joy every day. Every moment is filled with warmth and closeness. But as fate often puts a test on people's hearts, she is seriously ill. As she lay on her hospital bed, her breathing shallow and her strength exhausted, she clutched her husband's hand with a surprising strength, her eyes filled with love and fear. "Honey," she whispered, her voice lost in fatigue, "I can't bear the thought of leaving you, and I couldn't bear the thought of him falling in love with someone else. Promise me that when I go, you won't see any other women. Promise me that you will be faithful to my memories forever, or else you will return from the grave to haunt you." The husband's heart was broken at her words, at her impending death, and at the deep love he still had for her, agreeing to the promise she had asked. In that painful moment, he would do anything to ease her pain and honor the relationship they had built together. In the months that followed her death, the widow kept her promise. He avoids social gatherings, refuses all invitations, locks himself in work and memories, as if preserving a part of his wife in his heart. His world becomes small, lonely, leaving only work and memories of the past, a quiet but heavy space where time seems to pass slowly and prolong the pain. But as time passes, the sharpest grief begins to subside. And just when he thought he could start living again, an unexpected opportunity presented itself. In a local market, he meets a woman with gentle eyes and a warm smile, a kind woman who instantly makes him feel comfortable and at peace. Despite his promise to his deceased wife, he finds himself attracted to this new person. Conversations initially lead to friendship, and then gradually from empathy and sharing, affection develops. His heart flinched again, full of conflict, but also full of hope. The night he and his new lover got engaged, the worst fear he had ever imagined suddenly came true. As he lay on the bed, the room suddenly became cold, and before his eyes appeared the unmistakable image of his deceased wife. Her face was pale, her eyes glowing with wordless accusation. "I broke my promise to you," she said, her voice cold, carrying the breath of the graves. "You betrayed our love and dishonored my memory." But what really scares the man is not just her appearance, but the indisputable understanding she seems to hold. Night after night, she appeared, tormenting him with precision to every detail. She recounted everything that had happened between him and his new fiancée, word for word describing the most private moments, the most intimate exchanges. Nothing is hidden from this spooky presence. The phobia becomes so intense that the man cannot sleep. Dark circles form under the eyes, hands tremble constantly, and new relationships begin to crack under the weight of fear and exhaustion. Desperate for a way out, he decided to find a Zen master who lived in a small temple near the village. "Master," he recounted his story tremblingly, "the ghost of his deceased wife appears to me every night. She knows everything I do, everything I say, repeating our conversations exactly as it happened. I'm being pushed to the brink of insanity." The old teacher listened carefully, stroked his beard contemplatively, and was silent for a moment before smiling deliberately. "What a clever ghost. Admire her supernatural wisdom, but I'll tell you exactly what to do when she shows up tonight." That evening, when the room became cold and a familiar figure appeared before him, the man followed his instructions. He looked directly at the image of his wife, trying to keep his calm. "You're really a wise soul and knows everything," he told the ghost. "You see my every move, you know my every thought. But with that power, she can definitely answer a simple question for me. Let's try to answer something very simple. The ghost replied coldly, "Ask a question." The man bent down on a large bag of beans placed near the bed, scooped a handful and raised it to his hand, clenching it. "Tell me exactly how many beans I'm holding right now." The ghost opened its mouth but did not utter a word. Her shape fluctuates, becoming faint around the edges. For the first time since her appearance, she looks confused and uncertain. "I can't," she stammered, her eyes mingled with anger and confusion. And then, like morning dew meets sunlight, she simply disappears. The ghost never came back. The man is finally free to live his life in peace, no longer imprisoned by ghosts created by the mind itself. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us that we are what we think, and that everything we experience arises from our thoughts. This story teaches that the mind can create seemingly real experiences, so powerful that guilt, fear, and unprocessed emotions become living ghosts in our lives. Why do we give power to ghosts of our own making? Zen Buddhism shows that much of our suffering does not come from external forces, but from the psychological patterns and ghosts that we form internally. The ghost in this story is, in essence, nothing more than the man's guilt, pain, and psychological conditions projected outwardly. He knows every detail because it's his own memories and worries that are reenacting. Inner critics often manifest themselves in the form of the voices of parents, teachers, or significant others in the past. But their true power comes only from our own minds, making them seem present and frightening. The ghost of the man knows everything because it is his consciousness that is replaying every memory, every private experience. It appears strong when the sin and obsession in him are greatest, but there is no independent existence. In the practice of meditation, we learn to distinguish between what is actually present and what is complementary to the mind. The man really loves the newcomer, but his mind repeats the binding conditions that it is betrayal. The deceased wife is indeed gone, but grief and unprocessed guilt make her psychologically present. The master's solution is great at simplicity. By asking the ghost to know what exists only in the present, which the man's own mind cannot know, he reveals the true nature of the ghost. Even the beans in his hands had not been counted, and therefore no memory, guilt, or psychological prediction could provide that information. As Zen master Charlotte Juko Beck once said, "Our thoughts are just thoughts. They are not necessarily true. They are not necessarily important, and they do not necessarily belong to us." The ghost's accusations seem completely real to the man, but in essence, they are just thoughts and feelings formed from his own mental processes. This invites each of us to look deeply into our own experience. What ghosts are you carrying in your head? Voices that claim absolute power over your values, choices, and future, but are really just illusions created by the mind? These voices often claim to know what they can't know, what others really think of you. Do you deserve to be happy? Should you take risks or pursue love? By identifying the nature of these ghosts, separating them from reality, and being compassionate to ourselves, we learn to step out of the darkness created by the mind. Like men, we can look directly at our fears, guilt, and obsessions. Ask simple questions to challenge the power they give themselves, and thereby free ourselves from invisible obsessions. We recognize that freedom does not come from running away from the past, from pain or responsibility, but from understanding the origin of ghosts and liberating them with wisdom and awareness. And since then, life has become lighter, more authentic, and serene. The man is no longer torn between sin and new love, between memory and the present. He realized that all that had ever haunted him was only a reflection of the mind, and that when the mind is peaceful, free, and clear, nothing can haunt him. This is a reminder that Zen wisdom is not just about learning or reading, but about identifying, discerning, and living in awareness, where all the ghosts of the mind dissolve in the light of awareness and true existence. The Buddha once taught, the mind is everything. What you think, you become. As we begin to understand that our lives are the result of the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and the world around us, we also begin to realize that we have the power to question those stories, to examine their plausibility, and even challenge the power they have over their lives. In every moment, as familiar voices of self-doubt, guilt, or fear emerge in our minds, we may be reminded of the story of the man with a fist of beans in his hand, a story that reminds us that inner ghosts are only truly powerful when we empower them with our own beliefs. We can learn to find the courage to ask these voices to prove their supernatural knowledge. We can realize that thoughts that seem to know everything about themselves actually know much less than they claim to do. The Buddha also once said, doubt everything, find your own light. The moment we realize what these inner ghosts really are, the creations of our minds, they lose their power in an instant, dissipating like smoke in sunlight. As we continue our journey through Zen wisdom, another story of desire and contentment emerges as a living testament to understanding and appreciating ourselves. This is the story of a stonecutter who lives in the high mountains, where villages are scattered among the green slopes and the morning air is fresh, cold, but pure. He was a simple stonemason, someone who didn't know that he had already held the secret of happiness. Every dawn, he climbs the winding roads that lead to the quarries, carrying crude but effective cutting tools on his shoulders. Among the huge rocks, he sang ancient mountain songs, his voice echoing throughout the valleys, shaking the air and the hearts of those who unwittingly listened. Despite being poor by society's standards, living in a modest hut with few possessions, the stonecutter never wished for more than what he had. The simplicity of his life gives a sense of completeness. The steady rhythm of work, the majestic beauty of the mountains, the joy of honest labor, and the satisfaction in each stone that is shaped. His heart doesn't care about the world out there. He feels at peace with himself. One day, he is invited to work in the magnificent mansion of a wealthy aristocrat. As he approached the estate, his eyes widened in amazement at the magnificence. The marble columns soared, the gardens stretched out in perfect symmetry. Everything was elaborately arranged. For the first time, the stonecutter felt the throbbing of desire. He wished to have wealth so that he would not have to work hard, so that life would become easier and more prosperous. If only I were rich, he sighed, feeling for the first time that his heart was incomplete. To his surprise, a voice whispered from the surrounding rocks, "Your wish has been granted. From now on, whatever you desire will be given." That evening, when he returned home, he found that his humble hut had been transformed into a magnificent mansion, no different from the house of a nobleman. Filled with joy, he abandoned his old tools and began to enjoy a life of luxury. Rich meals, luxurious clothes, ornate rooms, and amenities he had never imagined before. But only one hot afternoon, as he looked out of his magnificent window, he saw the royal procession passing by. The king sat in the shade, surrounded by his entourage and nobles, looking calm and strong in the scorching heat. A new feeling arose in him. I wish I were king, and immediately he found himself reclining in the silk cushions of the royal chariot. But the carriage doesn't quite offer comfort. The heat from the sun penetrates the thick wall, making him realize that even power and status do not bring complete satisfaction. He exclaimed again, I wish I were the sun, and immediately found himself sending radiant rays of light and heat throughout the universe, feeling the power and greatness overflowing. But then the storm clouds gathered, completely obscuring his light, making him realize that even the ultimate power could not control everything. He went on to exclaim, I want to be a cloud, and became a giant storm cloud, flaunting its ability to cover the sun. As he falls into the rain, he encounters a huge rock blocking his path and realizes that his seemingly limitless strength is still limited, a rock that is simply stronger than him. In the end, he wished to become a rock. He stood tall on the mountainside, feeling eternity, perseverance, and absolute stillness. But soon after, he hears the sound of the little stonecutter working hard, the blows of the hammer echoing, making him realize a profound truth. Even if it becomes eternal or powerful, everything has a limit, and the real value does not lie in the form or power he possesses. He wished to be a stonecutter again, and so he returned to the familiar mountain road with the tool on his shoulder, among the rocks and the mountain wind. But now, things are different. As he shaped each stone, felt every mountain breeze, his heart was filled with a deep satisfaction that he had never had before. His song echoes again, richer in tone, not just lyrics, but joy in living every moment to the fullest. He learned that happiness does not come from external circumstances, but from the way he sees and appreciates what he has. The Buddha once said, "Health is the greatest gift. Contentment is the greatest wealth." The stonecutter understands that wealth, power, or other experiences are only means, and that endless desire only creates a never-ending cycle of discontent. We, too, often follow different conditions, believing that happiness will come with the next step, with new achievements, more money, or higher positions. But each desire, when fulfilled, only opens up the next, creating an endless cycle of dissatisfaction. As Zen master Suzuki Roshi taught, each one of you is perfect in your own way and could use a little improvement. This paradox indicates that the center of contentment lies in the ability to fully accept what is available, while still participating fully in the natural changes of life. The ultimate transformation of the stonecutter is not to become something greater, but to realize his own inherent worth and wholeness. Work remains the same, but the relationship with life has changed completely. Contentment does not come from having different experiences, but from seeing and bringing new awareness into every experience. Tonight, when you notice that the mind reaches for what is not here, you can try to learn from the wisdom of the stonecutter. Find your own song, live every moment to the fullest. Be satisfied with your true self. As the Buddha taught, contentment is a natural possession. Luxury, poverty, all artificial. The biggest change is not to be something different, but to realize the inherent completeness of what you already have. Through the story of the stonecutter, we see that happiness is not a destination, but a perception. When we stop chasing endless desires and learn to appreciate the present, we find deep peace. The rocks, the mountain winds, the sunlight, or ourselves all carry fullness and wholeness. And the Zen lesson still resonates. There is no path to freedom and happiness other than recognizing the inherent value of the present, appreciating oneself, and being satisfied with what it is. Now, let's explore a story about the nature of true help and the profound goal of true teaching. A story of an encounter between a psychiatrist and a famous Zen master. At a seminar for spiritual professionals and teachers, a psychiatrist who has spent years learning and helping people overcome psychological difficulties, analyzing problems, and providing therapeutic interventions designed to improve mental health, found himself having a one-on-one conversation with a master. Famous meditation. The psychiatrist was curious about the teacher's approach, wanting to know the difference between helping with modern therapeutic methods and Zen Buddhist wisdom. He wondered in his mind if years of study, analysis, and therapeutic tools were the only way to lead people through suffering, or if there was a deeper approach. During the exchange, the psychiatrist stopped and asked directly, "I've spent years learning different techniques to help people overcome their psychological and emotional struggles. I was curious about his approach. Exactly how do you help people?" The Zen master listens, not only paying attention to the words, but also looking deeply into the meanings and assumptions underneath them. After a moment of quiet silence, he replied with a sentence that was both simple and profound. I take them to a place where they can't ask any more questions. The psychiatrist stopped, confused. He wasn't sure if this answer was serious or some kind of Zen puzzle. I'm not sure I understand, he said. And the Zen master smiled, his voice gentle but full of weight. The question arises from the mind believing that it is missing something. When someone gets to the place where the natural questions end, they've found what they've been looking for a long time. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us, doubt everything, find your own light. This ancient teaching hides a profound paradox. True discovery does not come from endless questions, but from reaching a perfection where questions become no longer necessary. Why do we think that helping others means providing answers to their questions, when the deepest healing may lie in dissolving the questioner himself, making that person realize that they themselves are inherently whole? Zen Buddhism points out that many problems exist in our lives simply because we keep asking questions, and it is those questions that create and perpetuate these problems. The psychiatrist's approach, like most helping professions, focuses on analyzing problems, understanding their roots, and developing strategies to manage or address them. This method is valuable, can alleviate many types of suffering, and provide practical direction. But the master's approach suggests another depth, a more radical approach that goes beyond the symptom, but beyond the cause. Help people overcome the very framework they created for their problems. Imagine the endless questions that occupy our minds. How can I be happier? Why do I keep making the same mistakes? What should I do with my life? How to find meaning? Each question implies that the questioner is missing something, that they have to find something to be perfect, to be happy. But Zen Buddhism teaches that it is the person who asks the question who is also the source of the search. The mind is constantly asking, how do we find peace? While at the same time disturbing the peace that is already naturally present. The person who desperately seeks enlightenment may inadvertently reinforce the feeling of separation, creating a feeling of non-enlightenment even during the search. The master's method, getting people to a place where they can't ask any more questions, is not to discourage inquiry or promote ignorance. Rather, it's about leading them to a direct experience of wholeness, where questions dissipate because there's nothing left to look for. Zen Master Bankai taught, the unborn Buddha's mind can handle anything that appears. When someone realizes his or her basic wholeness, questions about how to achieve wholeness no longer arise. Problems that do not need to be solved. They are perceived as temporary phenomena in the vast space of awareness. It's important to understand that functional questions, like what I should eat for lunch or which way I should go, are still necessary for real life. But existential questions arise from feelings of inadequacy or inadequacy, questions of happiness, meaning, or wholeness, questions that end when we recognize our inherent nature. The Buddha said, there is nothing to do, nothing to gain, nothing to lose. This teaching goes hand in hand with the teacher's teaching. Real help does not come from giving others more things to do or more answers to seek, but from helping them realize that they are inherently what they are looking for. Take a deep look at your own relationship with questions and searches. How much of your mental energy is expended trying to solve problems instead of living life to the fullest? What if you stopped asking questions that something in yourself is fundamentally wrong or missing? The psychiatrist helps by analyzing and providing tools, while the master points out what doesn't need analysis or improvement. Both ways can serve, but the master's method is more aimed at the root, dissolving the seeker rather than just satisfying the search. That evening, when the questions that often occupy your mind appear, can you feel what lies beneath them? Can you find the cognitive space that exists before all those questions? Wholeness doesn't need an answer because it lacks nothing. As the Buddha observed, peace comes from within. Don't look for it elsewhere. And the most profound help we can get or offer to others is not to offer them more tools, more advice, or solve problems, but to acknowledge that what they seek has never been absent. The questions end not because they've been answered, but because the questioner realizes that there's never really anything to ask. As this story unfolded, the psychiatrist realized that for years he had focused on analysis and interpretation, while the profound essence of helping could lie in leading others to a direct experience of inherent wholeness and peace. He realized that knowledge and techniques were only useful when they served the intrinsic experience of wholeness, not to perpetuate the endless search. And in that moment, he found that the important thing was not to teach others the answers, but to direct them to an experience where the question was no longer necessary, where all concerns dissolved in silence and deep understanding. The Zen master does not impose, does not provide a list of formulas or theories. He directs people to where they realize that all they seek is already there, not missing a thing. When this realization arises, the question no longer arises because their nature has been realized. They are inherently only the product of the unconscious mind. Zen Buddhism reveals that many times suffering, anxiety do not come from the outside world, but from the way we ask questions, from the mind's constant search for something that is actually present within us. The story between the psychiatrist and the Zen master reminds us that in helping others or ourselves, it is important not to provide additional knowledge, analysis, or tools, but to lead to the realization that everything was perfect from the beginning. When the seeker realizes that, they no longer cling to questions, no longer looking for anything more, and inner peace comes naturally. Just as the Buddha taught, all wholeness and happiness are inherently present, and the path to freedom is to recognize that nature, not to seek it externally or in endless questions. And so this story is not just a lesson for psychiatrists or Zen practitioners, but for all of us. The deepest help, the true healing, comes not from prolonging the search, but from recognizing the inherent wholeness so that the question ceases naturally and inner peace arises without seeking or struggle. We don't need to become anything else, nor do we need to add anything external. All it takes is to realize that we have been what we have been looking for a long time. Now let's move on to a story about the thin line between heaven and hell, not in the far reaches out there, but right in the heart of each person. This is the story of the samurai and the gates, a story that takes place in feudal Japan, when honor, fighting, and the perception of life and death were always inextricably intertwined in everyday life. A tough warrior named Noiji, whose armor bears the marks of countless battles, eyes calm but heavy with experiences of violence and loss, approaches the famous Zen master Hakuan with a question that has been burning in his mind since his last campaign. He walked to his teacher's simple house, step by step heavy on the ground, feeling that this question might shape his entire conception of life and death. Hakuan, who was taking a sip of tea in silence, watched the warrior in front of him with a penetrating gaze. "Who are you to ask such a question?" he asked calmly. Nuigi, standing straight in his scarred armor, replied in a voice full of pride and pride. "I am a samurai. I served my lord with honor and never retreated from battle. Tell me the truth. Is there really heaven and hell waiting for us after death?" Hakuan's expression changed, and a smile of contempt appeared on his face. "You, a soldier," he said, his voice both gentle and sharp. "What kind of ruler would let someone like you protect him? Take a look at yourself. His face looks like an ordinary beggar, weathered and rough. How can such a lowly person claim to be the protector of nobles?" These words were like direct blows to Nuiji's self-esteem. His face was flushed with anger, and his hand instinctively touched the hilt of the sword, preparing to react immediately. This humiliation seemed unbearable. His mind immediately sank into the familiar rage and violence he had carried with him throughout his fighting life. Hakuan continued, his voice full of mockery. "So you have a sword? I doubt it's sharp enough to cut through the rice paper screen, let alone protect anyone important." The fire of anger in Nuiji's heart flared up, and his whole body trembled. He pulled his sword out of its sheath. The sound of metal hitting steel sounded sharp. His eyes focused only on the Zen master who despised his honor. Vision narrows, heart boiling with hatred, ready to end Hakuan's presence with a slash. At that decisive moment, Hakuan said with sudden clarity, "Here, open the gates of hell." These words pierced Nuiji's anger like an accurate arrow. He found himself, in that moment, living in hell without having to go far. The rage clouded reason, turning a peaceful afternoon into a scene of anguish and violence. A slow but profound realization arose. Hell is not some distant place after death, but a state he is creating for himself by choosing to react. Slowly, with great reverence, Nuiji lowered his sword, bowing to his master. Anger turns into deep gratitude. Hakuan smiled, his voice full of compassion. The gates of heaven open here. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us that hatred does not end with hatred, but only by love, an eternal and unchangeable law. What emerges in this story is a profound revelation of the inner geography of the human being. Heaven and hell are not distant destinations, but present experiences that we create through the quality of our own consciousness and choice. Zen Buddhism points out three poisons that cloud the mind: greed, hatred, and delusion. When Nuiji's pride is hurt, hatred rises instantly, turning a peaceful afternoon into a living hell. His entire reality changes in a moment, from curiosity about what happens after death to murderous rage. The story reminds us that within every human being, there exists the possibility for both states, heaven and hell, and that each moment is a choice: to enter hell through an unconscious reaction, or to open the gates of heaven with awareness. Consider our everyday moments. An important email arrives, and your peaceful morning suddenly turns into anxiety and resentment. Someone cuts you in traffic, and your spaciousness dissolves into discomfort. A thoughtless comment from a colleague dissolves your sense of satisfaction into pain and defensiveness. In the practice of Zen, we cultivate the ability to recognize these transitional moments, to learn to not draw the sword, to catch ourselves at the point where we are about to enter the inner hell. As Zen Master Huangpo taught, "Foolish people reject what they see, not what they think. The wise reject what they think, not what they see." When we are stuck in a reaction, we deny the present moment, reject the teachings of the Master, deny the opportunity to awaken to realize that our reaction is inherently a product of thought, not reality. The Buddha reminded that better than 1,000 empty words is a word that brings peace. Hakuan's insults are not cruelty, but compassion in disguise, an ingenious method of reflecting the very nature of the warrior's mind. By provoking Nuiji's anger, he makes it clear: hell is the state we enter when we choose to react unconsciously, and heaven is the state of awareness that unfolds when we understand and control our reactions. This doctrine invites us to observe ourselves. What situations, words, or emotions quickly lead us to inner hell? It could be a feeling of being looked down upon, misunderstood, disappointed, or having an unexpected challenge. Each experience offers the same choice. Will we draw the sword of reaction or recognize the lesson? Choose the paradise of awareness? When you notice the discomfort arising, remember Hakuan's moment, realizing that hell and heaven are not located somewhere far away, but right here in the moment you are living. When the unconscious reaction arises, you open the doors of hell. When awareness, mindfulness, and compassion arise, you open the doors of heaven. In modern life, these moments happen constantly. A temper when misunderstood, a disappointment when expectations are not met, or a little jealousy when seeing someone else succeed. These are all portals to hell. But in those same moments, if we become aware of our emotions, let go of futile reactions, and see through the temporary nature of things, we open the gates of heaven right in our own souls. Every action, every thought, every mental choice is an opportunity to transform the inner state from suffering to peace. It is in this moment of awareness that we understand that heaven and hell are not rewards or punishments after death. They are the experiences that we live in each present moment, created by the way we notice, feel, and react. When hatred, greed, or delusion arise, we are living in hell. When compassion, mindfulness, and understanding are present, heaven opens. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us that what we think we become, every thought, every action, every mental choice, shapes the quality of our experience. The story of the samurai and Hakuan is a poignant reminder that we always have the right to choose. Open the doors of hell or heaven in every moment. Self-awareness, alertness in your reactions, and ability to see through your own truth are the keys to living unfettered by negative emotions. Heaven and hell are not destinations, but experiences that are constantly created and liberated in our souls, depending entirely on how we face ourselves and the world around us. And in every moment, when you notice a small outburst of anger, a fleeting frustration, or a sudden desire, remember Hakuan's lesson. We are opening the gates of hell through unconscious reactions, or opening the doors of heaven through mindful awareness. Each moment is an opportunity to choose awakening, let go of the reaction, and open up the space of inner peace. Heaven and hell are not distant places, but the experience we live in right now, created and sustained by the quality of our own consciousness. And from that moment of awareness, we begin to see that peace, happiness, and freedom do not lie anywhere else, but are always present in every breath, every thought, every moment of our present. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, a simple yet profound story emerges, carrying with it a lesson about the most basic truth that we have always lived in, but often overlooked. This is a story about fish and the ocean, about awareness and blindness to the obvious. In the vast depths of the Pacific Ocean, where sunlight penetrates layers of green and green, where coral gardens sway in gentle currents, a juvenile fish swims relentlessly through familiar waters. Despite being surrounded by the wondrous beauty of ocean life, schools of silver fish gleaming like liquid metal, sea turtles dancing in the water, the rhythmic pulse of the waves on its face. The juvenile fish still feels restless at the persistent question that haunts its mind. One day, while swimming near an ancient sea turtle with a shell covered with scars of countless long journeys and ages of wisdom, the young fish asked earnestly, "Elder, I always hear other sea creatures talk about something they call the ocean. They speak of it with reverence, as if it were the most important thing in existence. But I searched everywhere, swimming through coral reefs, through deep waters. I couldn't find this ocean anywhere. What exactly is that mystery?" The turtle's deep eyes, like the fluctuating tides, looked at the fish with gentle and patient joy. After decades of storm and quiet, the turtle said in a soft, slow voice, "Baby, the ocean is what surrounds you on every side, at every moment." The young fish rushed back and forth, swimming to the distant water, swimming to the bottom of the sand, whirling around, trying to find what it couldn't see. "But I saw nothing but water, fish, plants, and rocks. Where is the ocean you speak of? Why can't I see it?" The turtle sighed softly, sitting more comfortably on the soft kelp bed, understanding that this was a didactic moment that required endless patience. "Of course you can't see it, child," the turtle replied. "That the ocean is both inside and outside of you. You were born in the ocean, you breathe the ocean, you are nourished by the ocean, and one day you will return to the ocean. The water flows through your gills, around you, covering your body like your own scales cover your skin. It's such a part of me that I can't even recognize its existence. The fish stopped, began to sense something vast and fundamental that had been present for a long time, but had never been named. You mean the water I swim through? He asked. The turtle nodded. Yes, I have never been separated from it, not for a moment in my existence. The fish feels a slow but profound awareness rise. Hitherto, all it knows is fish, coral, water, but has never called names, never seen the big picture. As the Buddha observed, all that is conditioned is impermanent, and awareness of this basic flow helps it to realize the profound relationship between the fish, the ocean, and itself. This ancient wisdom illuminates our relationship to the flow of existence, a principle that pervades the universe but often goes unnoticed in the rhythm of everyday life. Like the fish that do not recognize the ocean, we live immersed in the sacred but do not see it, because it is too close, too continuous, too basic to be recognized as separate from us. Zen Buddhism reminds us that people often seek out the extraordinary, the mysterious, and ignore the ordinary things around them. We think that spiritual truth must be found in a distant, dramatic place, when it is present in every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of awareness. The basic flow permeates everything. The change of the seasons, the cycle of sleep and wakefulness, the heartbeat, the way of thinking arises and dissolves in consciousness. It is the organizing principle behind the spiral of galaxies, the unfolding of fern leaves, and that pattern is present at every scale that exists. Try observing everyday life, how traffic organizes itself without a central controller, how conversations find their own rhythm, how the body breathes without consciousness, how solutions appear that seem from a place outside of deliberate thought. All are manifestations of natural flow, in apparent chaos, but creating spontaneous order. Zen master Alan Watts once taught that trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. The current or ocean is the same. It cannot be grasped, it cannot be contained, because we are its manifestation, rather than separate observation. Every attempt to understand the flow through conceptual thinking is like a fish trying to get out of the ocean to see it from the outside. Hopeless, but open to awareness if we let go. This flow is not just abstract philosophy, but the most direct reality. Natural intelligence coordinates the trillions of cells in the body, awareness where every thought and feeling arises, the life force that animates every living thing from giant redwood trees to tiny bacteria. In Chinese philosophy, the word Tao means the way, but this is not the way to reach a distant point. It is the path that passes through us, the reality that takes place moment by moment without control or management. As the words of the masters remind, the knife can be pointed out, but never the eternal knife. We use the limitation of words to look toward the limitless, realizing that the finger pointing to the moon is never the real moon. Tonight, as you feel the breath coming in and out of your body without conscious control, you can recognize this flow as present, manifesting itself through this simple miracle. You can see in the natural breath, in simple perception, the same intelligence that governs the planets, changes the seasons, coordinates life, and runs the universe. The Buddha taught, look inward. You are a Buddha. You are inseparable from the ocean of existence, just as a wave is inseparable from the sea. When we realize this non-separation, we no longer look for the Tao anywhere else, but begin to live as its own conscious expression, moment by moment present, fully immersed in the immense flow of life. The story of the fish and the ocean reminds us that truth, divinity, and wisdom are not something remote, mysterious, or untouchable. It is always present, surrounding us, flowing through every breath, every cell, every thought. It is only when we recognize this obviousness, only when we stop searching outside, that we see the true nature of being, where every being, every moment, every rhythm of nature is a living expression of the eternal flow, the flow from which we are born, survive, and return. And from that moment of awareness, we begin to live no longer as separate observers, but as the ocean itself, as the very flow of life, as the very natural wisdom through which everything operates in absolute harmony, awareness and awareness. Now, let's explore a story about the subtle but crucial difference between obedience and true understanding, a profound lesson that everyday experience sometimes can't fully teach, but Zen Buddhism always has a way of clarifying. This is the story of an arrogant priest and a gentle Zen master, a seemingly ordinary encounter, but with it a profound message about how power, influence, and understanding really work. Master Bankai, the famous Zen master, gained fame not only for his wisdom, but also for the way he imparted wisdom directly from the heart to the heart of his listeners. Unlike other teachers who often fill talks with complex philosophical arguments and lengthy quotes from ancient texts, Bankai speaks in a simple, understandable, yet profound manner that makes everyone from farmers to scholars feel that the message goes straight to their minds and hearts. His teachings were simple, but contained indescribable power, accessible to anyone, from merchants to servants, samurai to monks, all gathered to hear him speak of the natural peace that exists within every human being. Bankai's popularity grew over time, and this began to cause trouble for a priest from the Nichiren sect who prides himself on being learned, respected, and obedient. His temple became considerably emptier as his followers left to seek the Zen master, listening to his simple but powerful teachings. Father Nitaran has built his identity around religious knowledge and his ability to win theological debates. He prides himself on his extensive understanding of the power he feels when people obey him. The idea that a simple Zen master could attract his disciples just by speaking simply, closely, was like a personal insult, a direct challenge to his power and prestige. Determined to expose what he considered to be shallow doctrine disguised as wisdom, Father Nitaren decided to take action, storming into one of Bankai's gatherings. He pushed through the crowd, his robe flitting dramatically, his face stern with indignation, his eyes full of determination. The peaceful, focused atmosphere of the listeners suddenly becomes tense as everyone turns around to see what is happening. "Hey, Zen Master!" the priest shouted, his voice echoing through the hall, the rudeness of his address unmistakable, as if to directly test Bankai's composure. He regarded the simple Zen master as an ordinary street performer and declared, "Wait a minute, I have something to tell you." Bankai looked up, still absolutely calm, not a little annoyed or defensive to the interruption. His eyes gave him gentle attention as if it were for everyone who approached him, regardless of who came with a sincere question or a hostile challenge. The priest continued, his voice higher, trying to emphasize power and pride. "Even though everyone here respects you and will obey whatever you say, a man like me doesn't respect you at all. Can you make me obey you? Can your so-called wisdom make me realize your simple tricks?" The crowd held their breath, waiting for an angry reaction, a sharp rebuttal that would put this challenger in his place. But instead of getting angry or explaining with arguments, Bankai just smiled, a gentle smile mixed with sincere curiosity. "Please come to my side," he said softly, "and I'll show you." The priest, confident in his ability to provoke and his independence, walked triumphantly through the crowd, making his way to the front of the hall. He stood beside the Zen master's simple cushion, his chest heaving with pride, ready to show his independence from the power he imagined Bankai wielded. "Thank you," Bankai said, his smile still gentle. "Now we can hear each other better if you stand to my left. Please walk over here." Without hesitation, the priest turned to the left side as requested. At first, this seemed like a sensible, trivial request, but Bankai continued, contemplatively, "Maybe we'll get to know each other better if you're on my right side. Do you mind walking over there?" Again, the priest follows automatically, without realizing that he is following the teacher's instructions. Bankai's smile deepened. His eyes sparkled with gentle amusement, and he watched in silence. He realized that the priest, although he came with the intention of asserting authority and demonstrating independence, had voluntarily obeyed naturally, cooperating without coercion. "You obeyed me," Bankai said, "and I think you're really gentle and cooperative. Now, please sit down and listen to what I share." The priest stood stiff, slowly realizing what had happened. He came with the intention of demonstrating independence and superiority, but instead showed a natural willingness to cooperate. The whole argument for power, of the need to demonstrate superiority, dissolves, not by force, not by sharp argument, but by his own unconscious behavior. The crowd was silent. Many people couldn't help but smile, realizing that they had just witnessed an extraordinary moment. Not failure or humiliation, but gentle revelation of human nature and power. The teacher has shown that the real influence does not come from demanding obedience, but from inviting natural cooperation. The priest felt his anger and arrogance dissipate, and instead there was a sense of curiosity. How could a simple person like Bankai turn a hostile confrontation into a moment of understanding without asserting authority or imposing it? Still stunned, he sat down, listening for the first time in many years, not to find faults, not to prepare for criticism, but just to listen. The Buddha's wisdom reminded, true obedience is not blind obedience, but conscious harmony. The difference between compliance from fear or social pressure and cooperation arising from true understanding is key. We often confuse power with authoritarianism, influence with coercion. Zen Buddhism points out that true leadership comes from understanding human nature, not taming it. The priest comes in the hope of meeting someone who will dominate him, but instead meets someone who invites natural cooperation. His entire framework of power and influence is challenged in a gentle but profound way. Think about your own experience with authority. Do the most aggressive teachers, bosses, or leaders demand respect by force, or do they earn respect by calling out your best nature? The difference is fundamental. Compulsory compliance breeds resentment and resistance, while cooperation naturally produces real change. In everyday relationships, we often fall into the priest-like trap, approaching conflict with the assumption of overpowering others, preparing arguments, arranging defenses, being ready for battle. But Bankai's approach suggests a different possibility. Assuming the best about others and inviting wisdom, their natural kindness emerges. Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh writes, "When others make you suffer, it's because they're suffering deeply inside, and their suffering is overwhelming." The priest's aggression stemmed from insecurity and fear of being displaced. Bankai's talent is to look past the hostile surface to see the pain beneath, reacting to pain instead of aggression. This does not mean being passive or allowing yourself to be mistreated. Bankai keeps clear boundaries, does not engage in debate, but redirects the energy of the encounter to something more constructive. He turns a potential power struggle into a didactic moment, a living lesson in true power, real influence, and the wisdom of compassion. The Buddha taught, hatred is never soothed by hatred. Only by not having hatred can hatred be appeased. This is an eternal law. This principle applies to all forms of conflict. When we encounter resistance with resistance, we create tension. When we encounter knowledge with knowledge, we create space for transformation. Bankai has demonstrated that true strength does not come from coercion or imposition, but from the ability to invite, from the wisdom that penetrates human nature, from non-judgmental compassion that guides the inner change. The priest, from a state of arrogance and aggression, finally realized the important lesson. True obedience is not blind obedience, but recognizing deep down one's natural good nature to cooperate voluntarily and naturally. The story ends not with a triumph of argument or humiliation, but with a moment of insight, a lesson in power, influence, and understanding that anyone willing to listen can apply to their own life. Tonight, As you observe relationships and situations in your life that feel the need to assert your will or defend your position, you may remember the gentle teacher who never commanded obedience, but still received full cooperation from everyone around them. Ask yourself, can you invite others to develop their natural wisdom and understanding rather than trying to overcome resistance with power or pressure? As the Buddha remarked, in separation is the source of the greatest suffering in the world. In compassion, in deep and open awareness, it is the true power, the power that does not coerce, does not conquer, but leads and opens up the voluntary cooperation of people, helping them discover the possibility of creating beautiful and meaningful things together. True authority does not come from getting others to obey, but from wisdom to help them realize their own deep desire to cooperate. And from the lesson of compassion, we move on to a story of courage, faith, and intelligent surrender to the flow of life, a story of the crystal river. In the depths of a large crystal river, where the water flows as clear as mountain air, there is a village of tiny creatures. The river moves above their heads like a gentle breath, carrying the wisdom of countless springs, ravines, and distant seas, transmitting the rhythm of nature's life to every corner of the tiny world at the bottom of the sand. Young and old, rich and poor, all creatures live along the sandy bottom, clinging to rocks, branches, and roots to avoid the water from being washed away, as a vital reflex passed from generation to generation. Each creature learns to wrap its appendage around river rocks or fallen wood to protect itself. The elder often reminded, "Wait, the flow is very dangerous. It will sweep you to unknown places. Safety lies in staying where you are." And indeed, over the generations, clinging has become a survival instinct, a way to feel stable and protected in an environment where any loss of balance can lead to danger. But a tiny creature, different from all those around it, was tired of endless clinging. Day after day, he watched the flow above his head, watching it move with purpose, rhythm, and natural grace. While other creatures complain about the constant effort to stay safe, he wonders what it would feel like to once trust the flow, if once let the water lead him away without trying to control himself. One morning, he stood in front of the river, looked at the familiar rocks, looked at the clinging neighbors, and said to himself, "I'm tired of clinging. Although I can't see the destination, I believe that the current knows where it wants to lead me. I'm going to let go and let it take me. I was afraid that if I continued to cling, I would die of boredom before I could actually live." The surrounding creatures gasped in horror. "Idiot! Let go of it, and the waters will throw you over the rocks. You will be beaten, broken, and die faster than any boredom can cause." But the little creature decided, looking at the neighbors one last time, to let go of the familiar stone, to let his body blend into the flow. Immediately, the water swept over him, and as expected, he was slammed through the rocks. Each touch was a pain he had never experienced while clinging to safety. However, a miracle began to happen. When he surrendered to the current, refusing to try to cling to anything else, his body was gradually lifted by water. The dangerous rocks were no longer reached. He became one with the water, flowing to its natural rhythm, no longer resisting, but going in its direction. As they descend downstream, other creatures witness an unprecedented sight. A creature gliding through the water, in perfect tune with the elegant power of the river. Surprised and astonished, they exclaimed, "Surely you are the Savior who has come to save us all." The creature that drifted down the river heard the chant, felt pity for their misunderstanding, and called back, "I am no more Messiah than any of you. The river is only happy to lift us all free if only we dare to let go. Our real job is not to cling to the bottom, but to embrace this adventure, the great journey of faith and flow." But the surrounding creatures still squeezed the roots of trees and rocks, unable to let go immediately. They watched until the creature disappeared around a bend, then weaved legends about a miraculous savior, when in reality, he was just following the natural flow, letting go of fear and clinging. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us, you only lose what you cling to. This ancient teaching sheds light on a paradox. We spend our lives clinging to safety and control, believing that life will destroy us if we let go. But it is this clinging that creates the suffering we seek to avoid. Zen Buddhism points out that from childhood, we learn what is safe and what is dangerous, and this becomes a spiritual obstacle that prevents us from going beyond the confines of our familiarity. We also believe in the illusion of control, that if we hold on to circumstances, relationships, identities, we can resist the natural flow of change. But the truth is, life is in constant motion, and when we resist, we are exhausted by currents that are more powerful than personal will. Observe the areas of your life where you cling to. It could be a relationship that has gone beyond its original shape, a job that is no longer fun, or a self-image that has become narrow. The flow of change will continue despite attempts at opposition. Our choice is to burn out in futile struggle or to discover the grace that is available in conscious surrender. The Buddha taught, nothing is permanent except change. Water does not fight against the ridge, it finds its natural way down. As we learn to move with the flow of life instead of resisting, we discover the efficacy and serenity that rigid resistance never achieves. In this stillness, when you rest in the present moment, what can you be willing to release? Anxiety about tomorrow, resentment from the past, or self-definitions that have become too narrow? Can you feel the flow of things, the vibrancy of the moment, and the belief in its natural direction? As the Buddha taught, let go of what is past, what can happen, and what is happening now. Relax and unwind. In this belief, we discover that the current that we fear will destroy is actually the power that can bring us back to our true nature, opening up freedom, joy, and natural cooperation with life. We just need to have the courage to let go, to be in tune, and to trust. And then, every drop of water, every movement of the river, every moment of life will become a teacher, guiding us to the deepest wisdom, compassion, and freedom. Our next story illustrates the subtle but profound difference between understanding and true awareness. This is the story of a young monk named Tenno, who thought he had reached the highest level in his cultivation. After a decade of intensive study under the guidance of various masters, studying countless scriptures, and dedicating his entire life to the practice of Zen, Tenno finally achieved what he had long desired. He is officially recognized as a qualified teacher who can guide others on the path of enlightenment. Tenno's understanding of Buddhist philosophy was profound. His meditation practice was steady and stable, and his ability to impart knowledge and guide others has been proven. This recognition gave him a deep sense of pride, combined with an eagerness to learn more from the greatest masters of our time. With respect and eagerness, Tenno decided to make a pilgrimage to the Zen master Nanin, a master renowned for his rare wisdom and insight. Nanin's reputation was far and wide, and Tenno looked forward to engaging in in-depth discussions about the Dharma and hoping to receive valuable guidance to perfect his understanding. It was a rainy day when the Tenno arrived at Nanin Temple. The road is muddy, slippery, puddles reflect the gray sky. Regular rain makes him have to carry an umbrella to keep dry. Upon arrival, the Tenno carefully removed the wooden clogs and placed them on the covered veranda along with the umbrella, following the custom of respecting the sacred. He adjusted his outer garments, regained his composure, and entered the temple to meet the great teacher. Nanin greeted Tenno with kindness and respect, bowing gently as a fellow teacher, while maintaining the dignity of someone who has experienced and understood more. They sat in a simple reception room, and Tenno looked forward to an in-depth conversation about the subtle aspects of the teachings, the challenges of meditation, or the methods of leading students to enlightenment. However, After the initial greetings, Nanan asks a seemingly absurd question. I noticed you put your clogs and umbrellas on the porch when you entered. Tell me, do you put the umbrella on the left or right side of the shoe? Tenno was completely caught off guard. Of all the important topics they could discuss, why did this famous guru ask about such a trivial detail? He tried to remember the moment he put things down, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized he didn't know. He was so focused on the important meeting, so preoccupied with the discussions he hoped for, that this simple act escaped his perception entirely. Tenno's voice became whispered, full of shame. I don't know. In this moment of confession, Tenno realizes his own ignorance. Here, a mindfulness-certified teacher, someone who can guide others on the path to enlightenment, can't remember a simple action just a few minutes ago. Nanan smiled, not mocking, but full of compassion. Then you haven't reached full awareness yet. A truly alert person pays full attention to every moment, every action, every detail in the experience. The way you arrange your furniture reflects the same quality of attention that you bring to meditation, to teaching, to all of life. In that moment, Tenno's pride crumbles, giving way to a humble acknowledgement that his training path still needs to go deeper. He realized that true awareness is not something that can be achieved once and then possessed forever. It is the quality of attention which should be cultivated and maintained in each moment, both the most ordinary activities and the noble spiritual practices. Without hesitation, Tenno asked to become Nanin's student. Over the next 10 years, Tenno learned to bring the quality of conscious attention to every aspect of his life. He learned to put on his shoes, arrange his umbrella, and perform his daily tasks with the same reverence and attention he once gave to meditation or scriptures. Upon leaving Nanin Temple, Tenno became a completely different teacher, one who realized that enlightenment was not a destination, but a continuous, unrelenting journey, a complete practice of presence. As the Buddha observed, if you want to understand the past, look at the present. If you want to predict the future, look at your current actions. Tenno's story emphasizes that true spiritual growth is measured not by peak experiences or glorious moments, but by the quality of attention we bring to the most ordinary moments. Why do we assume that enlightenment exists only in special circumstances, in formal practices, or in a high state of consciousness? Zen Buddhism teaches that awakening is found precisely when we are able to be fully present for whatever is happening. Tenno's mistake was common. He had developed the ability to be mindful during designated practice periods, but had not yet learned how to extend this awareness to every daily activity. He can be awake while meditating, but unconscious when performing simple tasks. The division between spiritual activities and mundane tasks is one of the most subtle pitfalls on the path to awakening. We often think that consciousness is something that turns on in meditation and goes off during mundane tasks. True practice is the integration of awareness into every aspect of life. The Buddha taught, nothing is permanent except change. Water does not fight against the ridge, it finds its natural way down. As we learn to move with the flow of life instead of resisting, we discover the efficacy and serenity that rigid resistance never achieves. In this stillness, when you rest in the present moment, what can you be willing to release? Anxiety about tomorrow, resentment from the past, or self-definitions that have become too narrow? Can you feel the flow of things, the vibrancy of the moment, and the belief in its natural direction? As the Buddha taught, let go of what is past, what can happen, and what is happening now. Relax and unwind. In this belief, we discover that the current that we fear will destroy is actually the power that can bring us back to our true nature, opening up freedom, joy, and natural cooperation with life. We just need to have the courage to let go, to be in tune and to trust, and then every drop of water, every movement of the river, every moment of life will become a teacher, guiding us to the deepest wisdom, compassion, and freedom. Our next story illustrates the subtle but profound difference between understanding and true awareness. This is the story of a young monk named Tenno, who thought he had reached the highest level in his cultivation. After a decade of intensive study under the guidance of various masters, studying countless scriptures, and dedicating his entire life to the practice of Zen, Tenno finally achieved what he had long desired. He is officially recognized as a qualified teacher who can guide others on the path of enlightenment. Tenno's understanding of Buddhist philosophy was profound. His meditation practice was steady and stable, and his ability to impart knowledge and guide others has been proven. This recognition gave him a deep sense of pride, combined with an eagerness to learn more from the greatest masters of our time. With respect and eagerness, Tenno decided to make a pilgrimage to the Zen master Nanin, a master renowned for his rare wisdom and insight. Nanin's reputation was far and wide, and Tenno looked forward to engaging in in-depth discussions about the Dharma and hoping to receive valuable guidance to perfect his understanding. It was a rainy day when the Tenno arrived at Nanin Temple. The road is muddy, slippery, puddles reflect the gray sky. Regular rain makes him have to carry an umbrella to keep dry. Upon arrival, the Tenno carefully removed the wooden clogs and placed them on the covered veranda along with the umbrella, following the custom of respecting the sacred. He adjusted his outer garments, regained his composure, and entered the temple to meet the great teacher. Nanin greeted Tenno with kindness and respect, bowing gently as a fellow teacher, while maintaining the dignity of someone who has experienced and understood more. They sat in a simple reception room, and Tenno looked forward to an in-depth conversation about the subtle aspects of the teachings, the challenges of meditation, or the methods of leading students to enlightenment. However, after the initial greetings, Nanin asks a seemingly absurd question. "I noticed you put your clogs and umbrellas on the porch when you entered. Tell me, do you put the umbrella on the left or right side of the shoe?" Tenno was completely caught off guard. Of all the important topics they could discuss, why did this famous guru ask about such a trivial detail? He tried to remember the moment he put things down, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized he didn't know. He was so focused on the important meeting, so preoccupied with the discussions he hoped for, that this simple act escaped his perception entirely. Tenno's voice became whispered, full of shame. "I don't know." In this moment of confession, Tenno realizes his own ignorance. Here, a mindfulness-certified teacher, someone who can guide others on the path to enlightenment, can't remember a simple action just a few minutes ago. Nanin smiled, not mocking, but full of compassion. "Then you haven't reached full awareness yet. A truly alert person pays full attention to every moment, every action, every detail in the experience. The way you arrange your furniture reflects the same quality of attention that you bring to meditation, to teaching, to all of life." In that moment, Tenno's pride crumbles, giving way to a humble acknowledgement that his training path still needs to go deeper. He realized that true awareness is not something that can be achieved once and then possessed forever. It is the quality of attention which should be cultivated and maintained in each moment, both the most ordinary activities and the noble spiritual practices. Without hesitation, Tenno asked to become Nanin's student. Over the next 10 years, Tenno learned to bring the quality of conscious attention to every aspect of his life. He learned to put on his shoes, arrange his umbrella, and perform his daily tasks with the same reverence and attention he once gave to meditation or scriptures. Upon leaving Nanin Temple, Tenno became a completely different teacher, one who realized that enlightenment was not a destination, but a continuous, unrelenting journey, a complete practice of presence. As the Buddha observed, if you want to understand the past, look at the present. If you want to predict the future, look at your current actions. Tenno's story emphasizes that true spiritual growth is measured not by peak experiences or glorious moments, but by the quality of attention we bring to the most ordinary moments. Why do we assume that enlightenment exists only in special circumstances, in formal practices, or in a high state of consciousness? Zen Buddhism teaches that awakening is found precisely when we are able to be fully present for whatever is happening. Tenno's mistake was common. He had developed the ability to be mindful during designated practice periods, but had not yet learned how to extend this awareness to every daily activity. He can be awake while meditating, but unconscious when performing simple tasks. The division between spiritual activities and mundane tasks is one of the most subtle pitfalls on the path to awakening. We often think that consciousness is something that turns on in meditation and goes off during mundane tasks. True practice is the integration of awareness into every aspect of life. Consider your own habits. How do you present yourself when brushing your teeth, making coffee, or wearing shoes? Do you perform these activities with the same quality of attention that you give to more important tasks? The gap between formal and informal practice is where our awareness needs to be deepened. Zen Master Dogen once taught, "Practice and enlightenment are one." The quality of consciousness in any moment is both the path and the destination. Every moment is a complete opportunity to awaken. Nanan's question about the umbrella is not about material details, but about whether Tenno can bring deep cognitive qualities to every action, including the unconscious tasks he routinely performs. The Buddha reminded, mindfulness is the path to immortality. Inattention is the path to death. Mindful people don't die. Those who don't pay attention seem to be dead. True life is found in total presence, and this presence can be cultivated in any activity, however simple or noble. Let's take a deep look at the relationship between formal practice and your own daily life. Do you consider some activities to be noticeable, while others are done under autopilot? This is not about becoming obsessed with every detail, but about realizing that the quality of presence you cultivate in meditation can transform every aspect of your life. Even the most ordinary actions, seemingly meaningless moments, contain the greatest opportunity for awakening. When we sit in meditation, we expect mindfulness. When we go about our daily tasks, we can discover whether our awareness is truly rooted. In Zen temples, students are taught that washing dishes is as sacred as chanting, and sweeping the floor is as important as studying philosophy. It is not because these actions are special, but because of the quality of consciousness that we bring to determine their spiritual value. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, "Washing dishes is not just about keeping the dishes clean. Washing dishes is a way of living fully in every moment." This is the teaching that Nanin passed on to Tenno. Every action is an opportunity to practice full presence. The question of the umbrella and the shoe suggests that Tenno's decade of practice has developed cognitive abilities during periods of practice, but has not yet integrated that awareness into the seamless flow of life. He can be awake when conscious, but has not yet learned to make consciousness the default state. This inclusion distinguishes true spiritual maturity from mere spiritual knowledge. It's easy to be mindful when we're intentionally remembering, but the deep practice is developing a natural awareness that works whether we're paying attention or not. Tonight, as you end the day, brushing your teeth, getting dressed, arranging things for tomorrow, can you bring the same quality of attention that you give to formal meditation? Can you discover if your spiritual practice has infiltrated the unconscious habits that make up much of your daily life? The Buddha reminded, every moment is a teacher. Everywhere is a classroom. The umbrella next to the shoe was Tenno's teacher, revealing where he needed to dig deep. Often, the most profound lessons are disguised as ordinary. Only when we are awake enough to realize that true awakening is found not by transcending the mundane, but by recognizing the divine hidden within it. And that was the last message that Tenno carried when he left Nanin. Enlightenment is not a destination, but a way of life, a constant presence in every breath, every step, every action, even the smallest. Every action can become a spiritual practice if we bring full attention to it. Nothing separates. Nothing is too normal. Every moment can become a door to understanding if we are brave and humble enough to recognize it. As we continue our journey through Zen Buddhism's wisdom, we are invited to contemplate the transient nature of all possessions, of all that we consider to be our possessions. Perhaps no story illustrates this more clearly than the story of an inn that calls itself a palace. The story takes place in ancient India, when a famous spiritual teacher spent years wandering from village to village, sharing the Buddha's teachings with anyone who wanted to listen. His reputation for wisdom, compassion, and serenity spread throughout the country, reaching the ears of kings, nobles, and ordinary people. One day, during his long journey, the teacher arrived at the capital of a great kingdom, where a magnificent palace rose among the bustling streets like a crown set with jewels. The palace is truly an incredible wonder to behold. Exquisite marble walls, inlaid with gemstones that shine in the sun, reflect a brilliant light on every corner of the courtyard and hallway. The surrounding garden is filled with exotic flowers and fountains that wind like a dance, and soldiers in gleaming armor stand solemnly, watching every movement in the grounds. It is not difficult to realize that this is the residence of a holder of enormous power and wealth, a seat of authority that generations have built and maintained. The teacher approached the main gate, keeping the dignity of calm that he brought to every encounter, whether with the king or a beggar. The guards recognized him by his simple robe and serene demeanor, and no one stopped his steps. The news of the teacher's visit had been transmitted in advance, and they had been instructed to allow him to pass. Walking through the corridors lined with silk carpets and golden statues, the teacher headed straight for the throne room, where the king was seated on an intricately carved chair on a marble floor. Courtiers, dressed in lavish clothes and jewelry gleaming in the light from tall windows, gathered around the throne. The king, a middle-aged man dressed in a dark purple silk robe, wearing a crown of gold and diamonds, looked up as the teacher entered. He had heard about the teacher's reputation and looked forward to the visit, though he didn't quite know what would happen. "What do you want?" the king asked, his voice full of authority, accustomed to every request to be met at once. The teacher bowed respectfully, but his voice was quiet and firm. "Your Majesty, I want a place to spend the night in this inn." The room was silent for a second, and the courtiers could not hide their surprise. The king's eyebrows were raised, and his expression changed from curiosity to confusion. "This is not an inn," the king said, his voice a little exasperated. "This is my palace. I am the ruler of this kingdom, and this has been the seat of royal power for generations," the king continued, with a look of pride and certainty. The teacher nodded, contemplating as if receiving information calmly and considerately. "Can your Majesty tell me who owned this palace before you?" he asked with sincere curiosity. "My father," the king replied, his voice a little defensive. "He ruled this place before he died, and now this headquarters belongs to me." "So who owned it before him?" the teacher continued. The king began to feel where these questions were leading and answered slowly, "My grandfather," and he sighed slightly, realizing the direction of the conversation. "He also ruled from this throne and then died." The teacher stood still, allowing this obvious truth to settle down in the magnificent room where everything bore the mark of power and wealth. Silence enveloped. The courtiers seemed to freeze, feeling the depth of the dialogue. Even the king found himself waiting, almost hypnotized by the teacher's every word. Finally, the teacher said in a deep but clear voice, echoing in every corner of the room, "And this place is where people live for a short time and then move on." These words seem to penetrate the assumption of power, ownership, and identity that the king once believed so surely. The courtiers remained silent, as if witnessing something beyond the usual understanding of royal etiquette and worldly power. The Buddha taught, all things that are conditioned are impermanent. Be diligent in your salvation. This profound truth is realized through the story of the inn that calls itself the palace. Everything that we are attached to, everything that we think we own, is temporary, must go through birth, dwelling, weirdness, and death. The story invites us to reflect on our own experience. The house you call yours, the car you drive, your job title, your bank account, it's all temporary. You stay in them for a period of time, and then you have to leave, just like the people who were before you and will come after you. Meditation does not teach us to be indifferent or neglect our responsibilities, but invites us to recognize the transience and lightness of our care. The king's palace was magnificent and important, but it was still only a temporary residence for temporary people. This awareness helps us avoid unnecessary suffering from identification with role or property. When people forget that everything is impermanent, people often cling to it, creating anxiety when trying to maintain things that cannot last forever. Consider your own attachment, be it your professional identity, relationships, health, or spiritual achievement. Each is precious, but it changes over time. Directors will retire, parents become empty, students become teachers, healthy people will face illness. These changes are not failures, but natural manifestations of impermanence. Thich Newton once taught, thanks to impermanence, everything is possible. Impermanence is not for fear, but for celebration, for it is through transience that joy becomes cherished, suffering becomes lighter, and a heart that was once closed can open to love. In Zen practice, we learn the so-called non-attachment, deep concern while remaining gentle. This does not make us cold or indifferent, but helps us to love without clinging, to act without attachment, to enjoy without demanding eternity. The teacher's insight emphasizes that any one of us is not the permanent owner of anything. We are all temporary guests in the inn of being, borrowing our roles and possessions in the short time that life gives. This awareness can bring both liberation and fear, depending on how we receive it. The Buddha said, everything is impermanent. Try to accomplish as many virtues as you can. This doctrine encourages us not to waste temporary time, but to use it wisely, cultivating love, wisdom, and compassion. Tonight, as you rest in your temporary abode, among temporary possessions, try to feel the profound freedom of recognizing their transient nature. This awareness does not devalue what you have, but on the contrary, it enhances appreciation and the spirit of enjoyment. As the Buddha taught, of all the footprints, the elephant's footprints are supreme. Similarly, in all life experiences, awareness of impermanence is ultimate. When we remember that this life is only a temporary inn, we see the preciousness and urgency of each moment, thereby taking advantage of each opportunity to practice love, compassion, and wisdom. The story of the inn, calling itself a palace, is a poignant reminder. Everything you own, every role you hold, every title you attached, was temporary. Aware of this, you can live fully in the present, love perfectly, act wisely, and let go of useless attachments. Impermanence is not an enemy, but a companion to help us appreciate, and live more deeply. And so, no matter where you are, in your temporary room, among family, friends, or in work and responsibilities, see the temporary nature of it all. Each moment is a brief into experience, learn, love, and cultivate awareness. As the Buddha taught, awareness of impermanence is fundamental to salvation and enlightenment. It reminds us that everything is temporary, and that only by seeing through this can we live fully in each moment, and develop wisdom, compassion, as well as the ability to let go of what is not eternal, to enjoy the beauty of the present. Let us now turn to a story about the relationship between external circumstances and inner cultivation, the story of the horse and the mind. In a remote mountainous region where every step is a sobering reminder of death, Bankai put himself to the test to test the depth of his spiritual realization. For many nights, he sat in meditation under a wooden cross, using the proximity of death as a magnifying glass to penetrate deeper into the essence of existence. He had spent many years of training, traversing the realms of wisdom and stillness. But he knew that true awareness exists not only in meditative stillness, but also in how we react to unexpected circumstances, to challenges sent from the outside world. After finishing this intense retreat, Bankai decided to move to a nearby area to rest and relax his soul. He found a peaceful spot on the embankment surrounding a stable, where he lay down under the open sky, immersed in deep silence. However, his silence did not last long. A shrill sound breaks the quiet space. From inside the stable sound soaring whips, angry screams, and the fierce sounds of a warrior unleashing violence on the horse. The human screams mingled with the animal's painful groans, forming a sound that was terrible, but also full of lessons. Bankai watched the scene with growing interest. The warrior is clearly deeply frustrated and takes out his inner turmoil on the innocent animal. Each whip, instead of making the horse obey, only makes it more agitated, forming a vicious cycle of violence and resistance. Unable to stand still, Bankai called from his position, his voice calm but authoritative. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" But the warrior, engulfed in rage, ignored and continued to unleash violence, each blow seemingly only worsening the situation. Bankai was worried, not only for the horse, but also for the man himself, because it was clear that he was degrading himself by letting anger lead the way. The second time, Bankai called out louder, his voice majestic but still calm. "What do you think you're doing?" The warrior continues, lost in frustration and anger, unaware that his behavior is reflecting his inner state. The more the horse panicked, which only seemed to increase the man's determination to force him to obey by violence. For the third time, Bankai's voice rang out, filled with presence and inner energy. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" This time, something in the monk's tone, in his deep stillness and compassion, pierced the warrior's fury. The man slowed down, stopped his hand, climbed off his horse, and approached the embankment. His expression changes from angry to curious, and there is a natural respect that emerges, not for power, but for the profound quality of presence that Bankai carries. "You're screaming at me," the warrior said, his voice still hint of anger, but a mixture of curiosity. "Do you have anything to say to me?" Bankai looks at him with compassion, seeing not the enemy, but seeing a human being trapped in the same vicious cycle of frustration that we all go through in one way or another. He said, the words were simple but profound. "Instead of beating the horse for unruly, why not punish yourself and train your own mind?" These words hang between them like a bridge connecting two completely different approaches to facing difficulties. The warrior tried to control the outside world, unleashing his anger on an innocent animal, while Bankai pointed to an entirely different possibility: to train the mind, to regulate the interior, and to achieve calm no matter what circumstances occurred. The Buddha once said, "Victory over anger by not anger, victory over evil with good, victory over evil with generosity, victory over dishonesty with truth." This is the principle that Bankai is communicating. The story emphasizes that external struggles are only a reflection of our inner state. We cannot force the world to conform to our desires through aggression or control. The warrior's approach, beating the horse to submission, is the same way we often try to adjust to circumstances in life. We get frustrated by external conditions and react with anger, pressure, or manipulation, without realizing that the real job is to work with ourselves. So why do we often blame external circumstances? Buddhist psychology explains that the untrained mind seeks to maintain comfort by controlling the environment rather than developing the flexibility to adapt. This creates what Zen calls pushing the river, That is, trying to force reality to suit one's tastes, exhausting oneself without achieving anything. In our daily lives, we see this manifest in many ways. When a computer malfunctions on an important project, we get angry. When traffic jams slow down plans, we get frustrated. When others don't listen to our advice, we get frustrated. In essence, the problem is not the computer, the traffic jam, or other people, but our attachment to the desire to control the situation. We are like horse warriors, applying force to the external world while ignoring the inner state that creates suffering. The horse represents all the uncontrollable elements of life, the behavior of others, natural events, technological failures, and the unpredictable nature of existence. Zen master Pema Chodron once said, "You are the sky. Everything else is just the weather." This reflects the same truth that Bankai imparted to the warrior. Instead of trying to control the weather outside, we can learn to develop an open and calm inner sky, regardless of external conditions. The real practice is not to passively accept or ignore harmful situations, but to learn to react from a stable place within, one that is not stirred by anger or frustration. Mindfulness meditation teaches us to observe our reaction patterns without being swept away by them, practicing compassion that teaches compassion for oneself and others. Contemplating impermanence helps us to accept that all conditions change and that nothing lasts forever. When you encounter frustration in your daily life, you may remember Bankai's teachings. When you find yourself wanting to defeat the horse, that is, use violence, criticism, or manipulation to force the situation, stop and ask, what does it mean to train my own mind instead? The Buddha reminded that hatred is never tempered by hatred. Only by cultivating inner peace can true peace be achieved. The path to peace does not lie in conquering external circumstances, but in cultivating inner qualities, calmness, awareness, and compassion. When you train your mind, you learn to stand up to every thunderstorm, learn to observe without getting carried away, learn to react skillfully instead of reacting outbursts. Learning this, you will realize that external conditions, no matter how difficult, are no longer a source of suffering, but only an opportunity to train and express your inner qualities. Bankai did not frighten or punish the warrior. He pointed out a different path, the path of wisdom, compassion, and inner control. The warrior began to realize that all the violence, all the anger, all the frustration he poured on the horse was just a manifestation of the chaos in his mind. As he began to shift from external control to internal training, the external tension also diminished, and sensitivity and respect emerged. The horse gradually becomes calm and is no longer the object of violence, but the silent practitioner of the lesson of the mind that Bankai is teaching. The story emphasizes that external circumstances and inner states are always attached. If the mind is not trained, minor inconveniences become a source of great stress. If the mind has been trained, difficulties become lessons and opportunities for development. As such, we can learn that inner training, attention, stillness, and compassion are more powerful tools than any force or power. We don't need to change the world. We just need to change our own approach, and the world will reflect that change. Tonight, when you encounter the inevitable disappointments, when things don't go as they should, remember the story of Bankai and the warrior, of the horse and the mind. Ask yourself, what does it mean to train my mind? How do I stay calm, observe, and respond with wisdom and compassion? Then you will realize that hatred cannot soothe hatred. Only understanding and inner peace can create peace. It is the path to true freedom, the lesson from the horse and the mind, from the warrior and the meditation master, from whatever circumstances arise in life, teaching us that peace is in ourselves, not out there. Let's continue our journey with a story about maintaining inner balance regardless of external circumstances, the story of Master Hakuin and the power of being so. Master Hakuin lived in a small village where he was deeply respected not only for his wisdom, but also for his compassion and exemplary character. For decades, he maintained a reputation as a pure and enlightened teacher, a man who transcended ordinary human weaknesses and embodied the highest spiritual ideals. He lived a simple, quiet life, but every action and every word he said reflected his deep wisdom and unlimited compassion. The villagers often brought their problems, sufferings, and concerns to him, seeking guidance and inspiration from his exemplary lifestyle and wise teachings. In this village, there is also a beautiful young woman, the daughter of a well-known and respected family. When she became pregnant out of wedlock, this created a widespread scandal in that small and tight-knit community. Her parents were furious, demanding to know who was responsible for ruining their family's reputation. The girl initially refuses to reveal the identity of her father, trying to protect a person she loves, who, if the truth is exposed, her reputation and future will be ruined. But under pressure and anger from her parents, she made a desperate decision. In a moment of panic and confusion, she points to the only person she thinks can weather this storm better than her true lover, Master Hakuin, who is deeply respected by the villagers. When her parents' outrage confronts Hakuin, they expect a strong opposition, an explanation, or at least an expression of emotion when falsely accused. Instead, Hakuin just calmly listened to their angry words and answered only, "Is that so?" This seemingly cold answer reflects a deep spiritual state, an inner stability that no explanation or reaction can shake. The scandal quickly spread throughout the village. Those who once revered Hakuin now whispered that he was a hypocrite, living a lie. His reputation was destroyed overnight, and many former students abandoned him in disappointment and disgust. When the child was born, the girl's parents, with a bitter look, took the baby directly to Hakuin, declaring that it was now his responsibility. "Since you are the father, you must take care of this child." They put the baby in his arms and left, leaving him to face the consequences of a crime he had never committed. Again, Hakuin simply replies, "Is that so?" and accepts the child without complaint or rebuttal. For the next several months, he cared for the newborn with all the tenderness and devotion that any parent would give to his child, breastfeeding, changing diapers, walking during sleepless nights, singing lullabies, and caring for every little detail with unconditional love. Meanwhile, the neighbors, who had previously brought him food and respect, now ignored or spoke of him with contempt. He lost his status, fame, and livelihood, but continued to care for the child calmly and lovingly. While Hakuin takes care of the child, the young girl struggles with the weight of the lie she has sown. Witnessing the respected teacher suffer while caring for a child that is not hers makes her unbearable. Guilt swallowed her, making it impossible for her to live with this lie. Eventually, she confesses the truth to her parents, admitting that the father is actually a young man in the village she tried to protect. Her parents are horrified to realize what they have done to an innocent person and rush to Hakuin's simple home to apologize, carrying deep repentance and a desire for forgiveness. They bowed to Hakuin, saying, "Master, we have caused you to suffer unjustly. Our daughter confessed that he was not the father of the child. Please forgive and allow us to bring the child back to his true family." Hakuin listened softly, and when he placed the child in their arms, he simply said, "Is that so?" Thus, through all trials, he maintained his calmness, not being affected by the judgment, anger, or shame of the community. This simple but profound answer is the embodiment of the wisdom the Buddha taught. Hatred does not end with hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule. This story illustrates the profound power of maintaining inner balance, regardless of external circumstances or how others perceive us. Zen Buddhism teaches that true freedom comes from an unshakable center, an immutable inner point, where stability does not depend on praise, criticism, fairness, or injustice, honor, or humiliation. Hakuin's answer to "is that so" is not indifferent or passive. It is the manifestation of a deep spiritual practice, showing that his values and purpose come from within, not from external confirmation. Most of us will react very differently to false accusations, public humiliation, or a complete loss of reputation. The natural reaction is to defend oneself, resist, or try to force others to admit the truth. But Hakuin shows a different path, responding to every situation with equanimity and acceptance. He did not add to his suffering by emotional resistance or by trying to restore his reputation. He showed that peace of mind does not depend on external circumstances, does not need the world to treat it fairly in order to be at peace inside. The Buddha taught, "You will not be punished by the anger of others. You will be punished by your own anger." Hakuin is a vivid example of this teaching. When our reactions are not swept away by negative emotions, when we do not add fuel to the flames of pain, we protect ourselves from additional suffering, from resentment, self-pity, or a desperate attempt to restore our reputation. Instead of reacting outbursts, Hakuin chooses peace, and it is this peace that is the true power to overcome all challenges. Hakuin's story also reminds us to look at our own reactions to criticism, misunderstanding, or unfair treatment. How much of our pain comes from real events, and how much comes from our own mental and emotional reactions to those events? For example, a bad comment can be hurtful, but much of the suffering arises from how we react, from clinging to fame, narcissism, or frustration. Hakuin illustrates that we have more control over the second source of suffering, our reactions, than the first source of suffering, external events. When you encounter judgments, misunderstandings, or injustices in your life, remember the peace of Hakuin. It is possible to find the gap between what happens to you and how you react. That void is where inner peace exists. There is no need to be held hostage by external circumstances. Meditation teaches that peace is not sought from the outside, but growth from within. Enlightenment, true spiritual growth, is not measured by how life treats us well, but by how we maintain compassion, dignity, and inner tranquility, regardless of how the world perceives our worth or understands our true nature. Hakuin doesn't let judgment, slander, or social pressure shake his center. He doesn't pursue proving himself or protecting his reputation. Instead, he lived with compassion, cared for the child with all love, and maintained a calm mind despite all the gossip. This is a testament to the power of not being influenced by external circumstances, showing that inner stability is the key to true freedom. The story reminds us that, no matter how chaotic, unjust, or undesirable the external circumstances may be, we can still maintain a stable, calm, and clear mind. We don't need to wait for external recognition. We don't need to react to accusations or criticism. And we don't need to try to force the world to conform to our wishes. By cultivating inner peace, compassion, and wisdom, we learn to live fully and happily, even in the face of trial. Hakuin, with his simple answer, "Is that so?" has taught us one of the most profound lessons of Zen. That inner balance and freedom do not come from ideal circumstances, but from the way we face, how we maintain our inner center, regardless of what's happening around. He is the embodiment of the Buddha's wisdom, reminding us that each person is capable of maintaining peace, cultivating good qualities, and living a meaningful life, despite all the trials, criticisms, or injustices that the world brings. And finally, Hakuin's story shows that spiritual practice is not about hiding from reality or surrendering to fate, but about learning to stand firm, maintain calmness, compassion, and clarity in the face of all events, thereby creating a solid inner strength and an open heart, always ready to love and serve without being dominated by external factors. This is the path of true enlightenment, of inner freedom, and a lesson that anyone on the Zen journey can learn and apply in life. Let us now explore a story about the paradoxical nature of spiritual seeing and the limits of conceptual understanding. The story of the three attacks. and the deeper vision it offers. In a mountain monastery where the sixth patriarch Huineng taught, disciples from all over China came to study with the master, whose realization was said to be superior to all others of his time. The monastery, nestled among the high peaks and clouds, is a place of absolute silence, where every breath of the wind, every footstep of the monks, is harmonized to the rhythm of the universe, where only those who are truly open and patient can receive the essence of the teachings. Among those who came to the monastery was a brilliant young monk named Shen Hui, who stood out for his sharp intellect and habit of asking probing questions. Unlike many humble disciples who seek only basic guidance, Shen Hui often challenges the master with philosophical questions that are so profound that many listeners are confused. One afternoon, when the golden sunlight shone through the windows of the monastery, shining bright lines on the cool stone background, and the air carried the peaceful sounds of monks practicing meditation, Shen Hui saw the sixth patriarch sitting quietly in the main hall, his posture completely still. The breath is gentle and natural. The brow is serene but alert, the embodiment of meditation in action. Seeing the opportunity to challenge his understanding against the direct perception of the master, Shen Hui moved forward with a question that had formed in his mind from years of practice. The nature of awareness in spiritual cultivation has become a great source of curiosity and confusion for him. "Hello, master." Shen Hui bowed respectfully, but said in a confident voice, like one who believed that his question would open a new door of understanding. "When you sit in meditation, do you see it?" For Shen Hui, this is a perfectly logical way to understand the mechanism of enlightenment. Does enlightened perception involve a special kind of vision, a vision that goes beyond the ordinary senses? Or is awareness truly completely beyond all experience, existing in a state of purity that reason cannot grasp? Without warning, the sixth patriarch picked up his meditation stick and hit Shen Hui 3 times in a row. The blows were not gentle, powerful enough to cause physical pain, and left the young monk both bewildered and astonished. But after 3 blows, the patriarch was still calm as discussing the weather, asking Shen Hui, "When I hit you, does it hurt or not?" Shen Hui rubbed his shoulders, his mind racing to understand what had just happened. The question seemed simple, but the context led him to suspect that a straightforward answer would not be enough. His body felt obvious pain, but the mental implications were more complex, deeper, beyond ordinary logic. "That's both harmful and harmless," Shen Hui replied carefully, intuitively suggesting that the master was pointing out a paradox beyond conceptual awareness. "I saw it and I didn't see it," said the patriarch, his voice calm but full of direct experience, rather than philosophical speculation. Shen Hui couldn't understand it right away. His intellect still wanted to classify, explain, and find a logical mechanism for this contradiction. How could he see and not see at the same time? Did he see while meditating? How can both be true at the same time? The patriarch, with the patience of someone who has spent decades helping his students overcome the limitations of dualistic thinking, explains, "What we see are fluctuations and wanderings in our minds. What we don't see is right and wrong, good and bad of others. This is my seeing and not seeing." The entire teaching lies in this simple but profound teaching. The master does not speak of mystical vision or transcendent state, but of the fundamental change in perception that accompanies true spiritual maturity. Ancient Buddhist wisdom reminds us that the mind is everything. What we think, we become. This teaching is directly related to the patriarch's lesson on the nature of enlightenment. Why are we confused when spiritual teachings go beyond conventional logic? Zen Buddhism explains that the conceptual mind works through dualistic categories: seeing or not seeing, pain or non-pain, right or wrong, good or bad. But enlightened awareness does not eliminate these experiences. It transforms our relationship with them. The patriarch sees his own mental processes clearly. the arising and passing of thoughts, emotions, and reactions. This is not a mystical power, but rather a natural result of sustained mindfulness practice. He observed the fluctuations and wandered in consciousness without getting lost in them. At the same time, he does not see in a judgmental sense, imposing the categories of right and wrong, good and evil, on the behavior of others. This invisibility is not ignorance, but wisdom, realizing that such judgments often reflect more on the observer than the person being observed. When we look deeply at our own cognitive patterns, we may ask ourselves, what percentage of what we think we see in others is actually their behavior, and how much is a reflection of our own needs, expectations, and prejudices? When someone upsets you, do you see their real behavior or just your own reaction? When someone impresses you, do you recognize their true qualities or do you just see your desire to be accepted? This ancient wisdom sheds light on the difference between reactive perception and seeing clearly. Reactive perception is bound by past experiences, emotional needs, and judgmental habits, while seeing clearly is being aware of one's own mental processes, while remaining open and embracing what is truly present. Zen master Dogen once taught, to study the Buddha's way is to study oneself. To study the ego is to forget yourself. This teaching reflects the very understanding that the sixth patriarch imparted. True looking involves shifting attention to one's own mental processes instead of focusing only on external judgment. The 3 blows Shenhui received were not punishment, but subtle teaching, both physical pain and intuitive activation, which helped him feel the paradox of conscious experience. Pain is both present and nothing. Emotions are present but not attached, arise but do not contaminate the fundamental clarity of the mind. When we apply this lesson to our daily experience, instead of constantly judging other people's behavior, finding fault, comparing, or judging, we can shift our attention to observing our own mental reactions. When we observe our own tendencies to judge, worry, desire, anger, and fear, we will recognize patterns that repeat in the fluctuations and wanderings of the mind. This does not mean being passive or losing the ability to distinguish, but rather developing the ability to react intelligently, not to get stuck in old patterns. When we observe our projections and emotions, we are less likely to confuse them with objective reality. In the practice of Zen, we cultivate the so-called mirror mind, a state of awareness that reflects whatever arises without being stained or distorted. This mirror sees everything clearly while maintaining the essential emptiness and openness, aware but not clinging. In the evening, when we look back on the events of the day and find ourselves judging or comparing, remember the patriarch's teaching. Instead of judging what we see, turn our attention to observing our own mental processes. In this way, we discover inner freedom. Freedom does not come from changing external circumstances or forcing others to conform to our will, but from not allowing ourselves to become slaves to the fluctuations and projections of the mind. The Buddha taught, "You yourself, as well as anyone in the entire universe, deserve your love and compassion." When we learn to see our own spirit with compassion instead of judgment, we naturally develop the ability to see others with the same empathy, understanding, and kindness. The teachings of the sixth patriarch were not to explain, but to transform experience. Enlightened awareness is not about attaining a mystical vision, but a way of living, a way of existing in each moment with insight and compassion. When thoughts, feelings, and experiences arise, we are not caught up in them, nor do we impose labels of right and wrong. We just observe, understand, and let go, recognizing the transience and unstable nature of all phenomena. In this practice, every action, every reaction, every moment of daily life becomes an opportunity to practice wisdom and compassion. Instead of letting perception be dominated by instinctive reactions or conceptual judgments, we develop the ability to respond clearly, subtly, and kindly. Insight is no longer abstract theory or philosophy, but a living practice where wisdom and compassion integrate with each experience, each emotion, each behavior. The story of Shenhui and the sixth patriarch Huineng demonstrates that the spiritual path is not to flee from the fluctuations of the mind, nor to seek a transcendent state, but to learn to see them clearly, without clinging and without judgment. This is the path to true freedom, where wisdom and compassion go hand in hand, helping each person to live in understanding, peace, and harmony, no matter how chaotic or unjust the world may be. And as each person learns to perceive his or her own mental processes, they also learn to see others with sympathy, non-judgment, non-imposition, and with sincere compassion. The teaching on the three attacks of the sixth patriarch is not only a lesson in personal awareness, but also a reminder that every interaction, every relationship, every action in life can become a means of training wisdom and compassion if we observe, recognize, and respond with clarity and kindness. This is the profound lesson that Zen Buddhism gives to those who want to understand the nature of enlightenment. Seeing is not the possession of knowledge, not the occult experience, but the ability to see clearly the fluctuations and projections of the mind, and at the same time let go of judgment and open one's heart to all that is present. When we learn this, every experience, whether painful or pleasant, becomes a path to wisdom, compassion, and solid inner freedom. And we realize that enlightenment is not far away, but is always present in our own moments. Tonight, as we gently end our time together, do you feel that the tranquility you have just discovered is not created by these words, but simply realized, as if you have just dusted off a precious object that is always present, but is often obscured by daily worries and delusions? Perhaps you have noticed that the deep stillness you have touched tonight does not belong to any story or teaching, but lies dormant in your being, patiently waiting for moments like this to be realized. The Buddha reminds us that we often think that we have to become something, that we have to attain a certain state, when in fact peace and understanding are not prizes to be sought, but natural qualities that arise when we simply allow ourselves to be present. Allowing the mind to be still, allowing the body to rest, and allowing the heart to open without effort. Each of the stories we've shared tonight, from lessons on mind control and compassion to deep awareness of ourselves and the world, weaves a subtle tapestry of understanding, revealing a liberating truth gradually. Our suffering becomes lighter when we stop struggling with reality as it is, exists. True freedom is not the result of achieving what we want, but the natural flow when we loosen our grip, when we let go of fixed ideas about how things should be. Lasting contentment does not come from grasping achievements or materialities, but from finding abundance in what already exists in this moment, in this breath, in this heartbeat. Even as your thoughts wander about tomorrow, even as life becomes complicated and overwhelming again, the understanding you cultivated tonight is deeply rooted in your mind, ready to lead the way whenever you need it, like a lamp that never goes out. The ancient wisdom we receive does not offer a complex philosophy or an elusively distant ideal, but they illuminate something simple and beautiful. Silence is always present, and we just need to recognize it. The art of meditation, of mindfulness, is not anywhere else but in this very moment, in the natural breath, in the feeling of the body releasing tension, in the mind finding the path to silence without effort or strength. When you stop, settle down, and rest, you'll realize that peace isn't something to create, but something you've always had, just allowing yourself to feel. The gift of true teaching is not to add new knowledge, but to help us remember what is already in our flesh, in our very being. Tonight, you have tasted that nostalgia, a gentle return to your own inherent wisdom. The insights you touch are not strange treasures that can only be found in monasteries or meditation halls, but come alive in the everyday miracle of conscious awareness, in the simple act of paying attention with kindness, in observing each thought, every emotion, every breath without being swept away. As you bring this peaceful awareness back into your world, bring not only the stories, but also the silent confidence they have awakened, knowing that this mecca of stillness is always with you, available in any moment when you stop and listen within. May this understanding be a faithful companion, bringing light and comfort through whatever challenges or difficulties may arise in tomorrow. When faced with difficulties at work, family, or in relationships, you may recall that all you need to be at peace is already there. The silence that you have reached does not need a reason or condition. There is no need for achievements, no recognition, no favorable circumstances. It is the natural state of being, a treasure that is ready from the moment you are born, just to be seen and nurtured. And when you realize this, you understand that happiness is not the result of transforming the external world, but a union with your own natural nature, a union that makes every fluctuation of the mind clear and no longer a burden. Every moment of life, whether ordinary or difficult, becomes an opportunity for you to practice this awareness. When anger arises, you observe anger without getting caught up in it. When anxiety arises about the future, you identify it as a passing wave, not trying to hold on, not resisting. When joy or success comes, you enjoy them without clinging. Every experience, no matter how small or large, is an opportunity to elevate presence and cultivate understanding. In moments of silence, when you are simply present, breathing deeply and evenly, with a gentle mind, you realize that every attempt to achieve happiness or avoid suffering is actually just fluctuations of the mind. When you let go of them, peace comes naturally, like water flowing into a depression, like light creeping through a cloud. You realize that nothing outside can bring true peace, because peace is not possession, but a state of awareness, of presence, of acceptance. Tonight's stories, from lessons in compassion, patience, self-observation, to letting go of judgment, are all aimed at one purpose: to help you recognize this simple but profound truth. When you face suffering, you don't fight it, you don't run away. You observe, you understand, and thus you become free from that pain. When you face joy, you don't cling. You enjoy and allow that joy to pass, realizing that it is all temporary and that the only eternity is the awareness that you have cultivated. Presence, mindfulness, and compassion are the tools that Zen Buddhism gives us, not to change the outside world, but to transform the way we experience the world. When you live with inner clarity, you are no longer a slave to emotional fluctuations or judgments of right and wrong, good and bad. You can face it all without being stirred. You can act with wisdom and kindness, and from there, each action becomes a spiritual practice. The Zen student who observes himself will realize that true freedom is not a distant destination, but a state of being right here, right now, in every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of stillness. The peace you feel tonight is not temporary or illusory. It already exists, and each time you realize it, you deepen the truth that every difficulty, every challenge, every vivid moment is a means for you to practice, for you to connect with your inherent being and wisdom. When you return to the world with all the complexities and chaos of life, remember that this inner Mecca is always with you. Whenever you need to, stop, take a deep breath, feel the stillness in your body, and realize that every fluctuation of your mind is just clouds that pass through the sky of your mind. Nothing can diminish this light, and nothing can take away the peace you have discovered. May the understanding, peace, and compassion you have felt tonight become your faithful companion, guiding you through every challenge, illuminating every moment, and reminding you that freedom, happiness, and wisdom are always present within you. No searching, no trying, just recognizing. As you walk tomorrow, remember that you carry a priceless inner treasure, a mecca of stillness that is always ready, waiting for you whenever you stop and listen. Thank you for joining us on this journey tonight in the space of the Monk Tells Bedtime Stories. Sleep well, And when sleep comes, let your mind be still, breathe soften, and your heart open, knowing that every moment is an opportunity to realize the freedom and peace that already exists within you.